serving UMaine as Assistant Vice President for Research and Director of the Center for Undergraduate Research. We are excited to host the 11th Annual Cougar Showcase alongside the 24th Annual Graduate Expo for the 5th time jointly as the UMaine Student Symposium. We received 317 submissions back in April 2020 from over 1,000 co-authors. I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate all of the student presenters here today for a job well done. The depth and breadth of the research and creative activities displayed is a testament to your hard work. We are in unprecedented times and had to change the format of the symposium to virtual to protect everyone's health and safety. This change brought more challenges with it, which you all rose to the occasion and showed even more strengths and perseverance. I would like to invite guests to take the opportunity to interact with the student presenters to see how the University of Maine is impacting the state workforce and economic development through teaching, research, and outreach. If you are a new student or have attended the symposium to learn more about the research enterprise at UMaine, we welcome you and invite you to use this opportunity to explore the breadth and depth of research being conducted across disciplines at the University of Maine. Our undergraduate and graduate students that engage in research opportunities are an integral part of the authentic research communities and have remarkable impact on our research programs. They contribute to the generation of new knowledge, advance their respective fields, and ultimately have tremendous success in their future professional careers due to in part to these experiences. If you are interested in research, we invite you to become a part of this vibrant community. I would like to start the opening ceremony now by introducing our Vice President for Research and Dean of the Graduate School, Dr. Kodi Bahramian, to make opening remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Abedi. I'm delighted to be joining everyone this morning for the University of Maine 2020 Student Symposium. This annual event provides an opportunity for our students to showcase their research and creative work. As will be demonstrated today, our students contribute to the discovery and advancement of new knowledge that makes a direct difference to the people of Maine and beyond. Moreover, the University of Maine, as the state's public research university, is uniquely positioned to provide our students the opportunity to receive invaluable experiential learning through direct exposure to research and discovery. I also would like to acknowledge that today's event is the culmination of the annual Maine Impact Week, which is intended to provide an opportunity for the public to gain awareness about the latest efforts by Maine's Research University in contributing to the social and economic advancement of Maine and beyond. At this point, it is my great pleasure to introduce my colleague, Dr. John Boren, who since last August has joined the University of Maine as the Executive Vice President for Academic Affairs and Provost. Among other things, he's a great supporter of research and experiential learning, and we are really delighted to have him at UMaine. Dr. Boren, you may proceed now.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Kodi, for that kind of introduction. As of today, I have now served as a provost at the University of Maine for just 7 weeks. And throughout these weeks, I've actually had the opportunity to meet a number of dedicated and talented faculty, staff, and students. And I want to welcome, particularly today, our student authors and presenters, the mentors and judges, the faculty and staff, student attendees, and our external guests. So even though 7 weeks is a short time, I would like to note how impressed I am by the contribution our undergraduate and graduate students make through their research, scholarship, and creative activity. Our students are truly inspiring. The range of presentation topics at this symposium is remarkable. Seeking advances in solving problems, creating new knowledge, and discovering new ways to communicate and envision our world. As educators, we know that learning is significantly enriched by the opportunity to participate in original research projects and creative activity. And the University of Maine Student Symposium highlights the myriad talents and passions that drive our students and foretells the promise of the impact they will make in the future. It's truly these type of activities are so exciting to me to see that original thought come through. So I want to congratulate those who overcame the challenges presented by the current public health crisis and made this event possible. It speaks to your resilience and perseverance. So I appreciate the work done by all of those on the UMaine Student Symposium Planning Committee and the partners and sponsors who support this great event. I also thank those of you who have and will participate as judges for today's event. Your collective efforts make this possible. So whether you plan to attend some of the workshops, the technical sessions, the awards ceremony, or listen to our featured speaker later, retired United States Army Staff Sergeant Travis Mills, I hope you all have a wonderful experience today at this virtual student symposium. So thank you for being here. And now it's my pleasure and honor to introduce our next speaker, who will share some thoughts and words of welcome. Please join me in welcoming our president of the University of Maine and the University of Maine at Machias, Dr. Joan Farini-Mundy.
Thank you, John. Thank you, everyone who has put this event together for today. What an incredible effort and wonderful opportunity to showcase the incredible research of the University of Maine. My video, okay. And I'm just delighted to welcome you all here. That welcome goes to our undergraduate and graduate students, the researchers who are presenting their scholarly and creative work here today, as well as to their mentors and advisors. I'm very proud of this research, the scholarship, the creativity that is demonstrated here, and I invite all who are attending virtually to take a look at this wonderful range of great excellence that you're going to see here today. I'm excited, along with everyone else, to think about how the innovations and discoveries that are being presented here will benefit the people of Maine and beyond. My welcome also extends to everyone from outside of the campus who's joining us from the cities and towns throughout Maine and from countries around the world. Come and find out about the University of Maine. It's a fantastic place, and we would love to be waiting. We'd love to find ways to connect to you even more fully. I want to say a little bit about the place of undergraduate research, particularly in the state's research university. And it goes this way. Of course, undergraduates' experiences will be greatly enriched by being a part of the very creative and innovative work that goes on in a research setting, in a scholarly development setting, in a creative production area. And we believe that at the University of Maine, we want that experience to be available to everybody. And so this symposium, the work that it represents, is the first step in making sure that we become known as a university that welcomes undergraduates into our research enterprise deliberately and intentionally from the day they walk in the door. That's where we are headed. Now, that's great for the undergraduates. We know that the graduate students are here together with them because they are serving as mentors and advisors and the faculty who are a part of this. But from my own experience as a researcher, I want to say that as a researcher, I always benefited from the engagement of the students because they would have sometimes better ideas than the researchers, and they would push the work in ways that we might not ever have thought about. So it's all one big community, and we're delighted to showcase it for you here today. There are 270 scholars showcasing 130 research-based projects that span interests and disciplines, including the social sciences, humanities, engineering, education, the arts, sciences, and business. I also call to your attention the multitude of workshops and technical sessions offered today, and what we know will be an inspiring talk by keynote speaker, Staff Sergeant Travis Mills. So enjoy the day and let us know how it is. I also have the distinct pleasure now of introducing our Chancellor, Daniel Malloy, the Chancellor of the University of Maine System. Chancellor Malloy has been with us just over a year and has just been a remarkable leader for us. He's encouraging the systems to significantly increase the collaborative multi-campus academic programs that we all share in a way that can benefit the state of Maine, the students of Maine, the people of Maine, and well beyond. We have achieved our first steps in unified accreditation as a system due to his leadership. He is also the lead of the system's comprehensive student and state-focused response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Right now, more than 2,700 students system-wide are continuing their education. Thank you to the Chancellor and his leadership, to robust faculty and staff engagement, and to the academic accommodations, testing, and technology investments that we've made throughout the system. Before coming Chancellor, Chancellor Malloy was a two-term governor of Connecticut, where he helped create 124,000 private sector jobs, and prioritized structural reforms to improve the state's long-term fiscal health. He was a Rappaport Distinguished Visiting Professor at Boston College Law School. He also taught undergraduate political science as an adjunct professor at the University of Connecticut. He's going to visit a political science course here on the UMaine campus next week. In 2016, Chancellor Malloy was presented the John F. Kennedy Profile and Courage Award for defending the U.S. resettlement of Syrian refugees amid security concerns following the November 2015 terrorist attacks in Paris. Chancellor Malloy earned a bachelor's degree in political science and sociology at Boston College and is a graduate of Boston College Law School. I need to say on a personal note that Chancellor Malloy is a tremendous supporter of the research enterprise here at the University of Maine. He is a wonderful colleague, great friend, and I so look forward to hearing his remarks. Thank you, Chancellor Malloy.
Thank you, Joan. I don't know whether I'm not sure whether it will be picked up on the screen, but your comments have caused me to blush. It's great to be with you. I think I should point out that Joan is a national leader in research, mathematic education, and STEM education. And quite frankly, I think we're extremely lucky to have her as our president at our flagship university, our research university, our space grant and sea grant university. Her leadership is nothing short of fantastic, and it's great to be with her. Let me say to all of you who are participating and have participated in what's led up to this day, thank you for your engagement. Thank you for the research that you're conducting and the ideas that you are bringing to the fore. You know, one of the things about being connected with a research university, as I am, is that it is an enlivening experience to understand how many people are working on making the world a better place through science, through innovation, and yes, through investment. This is an exciting time for us at the University of Maine system, and most particularly at our research university. I do want to take a moment and talk about the difficulties we are currently in with respect to the COVID experience that we're all sharing in. Obviously, this very conference was delayed because of that virus. We understand at our campuses that the virus is in fact in charge. We can only react and protect ourselves going forward. We are driven in all of our decisions by a science advisory board that was set up with the help of the president who just spoke. We take that information seriously. We apply it to all that we do in our attempts to keep our state safe, our campuses safe, meaning our students, faculty, and staff. We are driven by the science that is presented to us on a regular basis. To all of you who participated in the preparations and are making presentations at this time, thank you for your good work and my best to you. For those of you who are being introduced to the University of Maine, study us, understand what our capabilities are. If you're if you're in high school participating, seeing this presentation, think seriously about joining us in the near future. Maine's future is bright, in large part because of the work that's being done at this university and because of the great ideas and intellect that's being applied here. Have a great conference, and thank you for participating.
Thank you, Chancellor Malloy. I would like to also thank UMaine administration, President Franny Mundy, our Provost John Boren, and also our Vice President for Research, Dr. Kodi Vahramian. At this point, it's my great pleasure to introduce the President of Graduate Student Government at the University of Maine, Mr. Saman Zareh, to go over the UMSS program. Saman.
Thank you, Professor Abedi. Today, despite the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic, over 130 projects presented by 270 co-authors have showcased their work during the UMSS 20 in 10 technical categories covering arts, humanities, engineering, education, natural, physical, and social sciences. And for the third time, we have a new interdisciplinary research category to promote and celebrate teamworks from multiple colleges and departments solving a complex problem. All presentations are posted online with voice over PowerPoint and with accessibility features. Each presentation is judged by 2 or 3 judges and scored according to the published symposium rubric. In addition to the technical sessions, we also have several special sessions on major scholarships, grant writing, and professional advice from the Career Center. We have a great keynote speech by retired United States Army Staff Sergeant Travis Mills at 12 noon, followed by the award ceremony at 1 p.m., which you don't want to miss. We have an information booth, and we will post that link in the chat now in case you have questions or can't find your Zoom room. I would also like to thank our sponsors who made this event possible with their generous support. Our 2020 hosts are Student Government, Graduate Student Government, Center for Undergraduate Research, and Office of the Vice President for Research and Dean of the Graduate School. Our platinum sponsors are Texas Instrument, Maine Technology Institute, Alton 38, and Adelaide Ham Campus Activity Fund. Our silver sponsors are IEEE Maine Section and Activus Diagnostics. And our bronze sponsors are University Credit Union, Upstart Center for Entrepreneurship, Jackson Lab, SMRT Architects and Engineers, TRC Companies Inc., Power Engineers, and ND Paper. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the symposium.
Thank you, Saman. At this point, we are concluding the opening ceremony. Now you have 2 different choices. Either you can go to the technical sessions or stay here for special sessions and workshops. Thanks very much again, everyone, for joining us for the opening ceremony. And we are now starting the special sessions here. It's my great pleasure to introduce Associate Director of Center for Undergraduate Research, Dr. Melissa McGinnis, to conduct the special session ceremony.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Ali, for that kind introduction. I'm Melissa McGinnis. I'm the Associate Director of the Center for Undergraduate Research, and I'd like to welcome you all to the special sessions. So now, if you are not presenting or attending any of the technical sessions, you're welcome to attend one of our 5 special sessions that will be starting in just a few minutes. We will have presentations from the Office of Major Scholarships, a workshop on effective grant writing. I will be giving a workshop on the science behind the COVID-19 pandemic, and we'll have a networking and job search strategy session from the University of Maine Career Center, and also a session on UMaine sustainability. So otherwise, you can feel free to drop off of this webinar and visit your technical session Zoom rooms. And you're welcome to come back later for the keynote speaker, Travis Mills, at noon, and the presentation of awards at 1 p.m., which you surely don't want to miss. All of this is listed in the program as well. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen and then we can get started. So listed here are the morning special sessions. So we're going to start with a major scholarship introduction by the director of the Office of Major Scholarships, Nevis Dalbo-Wheeler. And then we'll have the effective grant writing session, followed by the science of COVID-19, the Career Center session, and then UMaine sustainability, and then our feature speaker, Travis Mills, and the award ceremony. I'd like to just take a moment to recognize all of our co-hosts, as well as all of our sponsors. So we will get started with Nevis Dalbo-Wheeler's presentation in the Major Scholarships introduction. And it's my pleasure to introduce Nevis, who is a wonderful director of the Office of Major Scholarships, and she also leads our Maine Top Scholars program. It's been really such an honor to work with Nevis on both of those efforts. And she is going to talk about the prestigious scholarships for both graduate and undergraduate students at the University of Maine. I'll turn it over to Nevis.
Good morning, everyone. It is a real honor to be talking about the opportunities offered by the Office of Major Scholarship to this group, to this audience at the UMaine Student Symposium. What I will be talking about today is summarized here. I will be talking about who we are at the Office of Major Scholarships. I will be telling you about what major merit scholarships are, what they have in common. I will also describe what kind of support this office offers. And then I will give you also a list of the opportunities that are available through this office. Now, the opportunities I will list are about 18. And I won't be able to go in depth into any of them, but please reach out to us via email if you have other questions. We are located physically on the first floor of Estabrook. And in addition to myself, I have a graduate assistant, Taylor Cray, working at the office. We have a website and also an Instagram and a Facebook account where you can follow us and you can get updated information on the different events that we're holding. I will move now on to tell you about what major merit scholarships are. So those are a subset of the scholarship opportunities that are available at UMaine. They are different from the opportunities that you have at the financial aid office or at the graduate school or at the individual department. Those are opportunities that graduate and undergraduate students apply to when they are students already at UMaine. They are all external funding, with the funding coming from various institutions, agencies, and the government. So the competition happens at the national level. The application process is such that it takes from 1 month to 6 months to complete an application. So the applications are rather involved. Some of the scholarships require an internal nomination that happens at the UMaine level, and that has us working with several faculty advisors and on various committees that prepare the students and put forward a selected number of students for the national competition. It is also very, very important to remember the timeline of this kind of applications. So the timeline is such that the funding becomes available a year to a year and a half from the time when the application is submitted. So for instance, if a student would like to participate in a Fulbright program abroad in the fall of 2021, they will be starting to work with this office in the spring of 2020, so over a year earlier, put in an application in the fall of 2020 for a funding opportunity that becomes available a full year later. All those opportunities are very prestigious, and it is really something that opens many doors when a student is awarded such opportunities. I will now describe to you what the office offers, what we do here at the Office of Major Scholarships. So we first and foremost inform everybody about the 15 to 18 opportunities that are available. We talk to students, faculty, and staff. We help the student understand the mission of each National Merit Scholarship. They're all a little bit different, and it is very, very important in order to write a successful application to understand why they are giving this funding. Then we give support during the application process. This is really everything from understanding the eligibility criteria to filling out the application, to giving feedback on the essays. We really work a lot with students on their essays. And also we support students and advise them on how to work with their recommenders. Additionally, we help them remember the different deadlines. Sometimes scholarships have an internal, a campus deadline, and then a national deadline. Because we have had so much success in getting students awarded those scholarships in the last few years, we're able to offer some peer-to-peer mentoring. So some of the students, and you will see some of the awardees later in the presentation, do participate in our info session and help us with working with applicants. Also, we serve as a connection between the students and the agencies that award the funding. This is because sometimes there are questions we're not able to answer, and it is absolutely useful to be able to go and ask, so we don't make any mistakes during when we prepare the application. And lastly, but probably most importantly, we have the goal of helping students submit competitive applications. Within that, we focus on student development, and we have designed a set of skills that students really learn while they're applying for a scholarship, and that they will keep with them independently from the outcome of the application. I will now go on and bring you in really some of the details of the funding opportunities. As I said, I will just say sort of the surface here, but you should reach out for questions if you would like to apply for any of those opportunities. I will start with the set of opportunities that I think are most interesting for this group, which are opportunities for undergraduate students to get additional funding for their studies at UMaine. Those are the Goldwater Scholarship, the Noah Holling Undergraduate Scholarship, and the Udall Scholarships. I will start with the Goldwater Scholarship. This is a scholarship really rooted in research in the STEM areas. So students who are strong candidates for this scholarship are students who started research really early on as freshmen and continue after that. Sometimes have an experience with research outside of UMaine. And they can apply as sophomore or junior students, and they have to have a goal to go to graduate school after they complete their undergraduate degree. The amount of the funding is up to $70,500 per year. We have had several successful applicants throughout the year, and here are the last 4 that have received this scholarship, and it has been absolutely a pleasure to work with them and to see them continue with their career and to have the Goldwater make their future career stronger. As with some of this funding, we also work with a faculty advisor who is Professor Robert Wheeler, and who help us, especially on the research part of this scholarship. We have an info session coming up in a couple of weeks on October 20th on this scholarship. So if you're interested, please join us for that. The internal deadline for the Goldwater Scholarship is November 30th. I will now move on to the Noah Hollings Undergraduate Scholarship, which is a scholarship that sophomore students apply to. And those are students who, whose work makes an impact in issues related to the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration. And please consider this broadly. So this is not only marine science, but it touches really many other disciplines like climate change, for instance, archaeology, several other areas. It's a beautiful scholarship that covers 2 years for $9,500 per year, with an amazing opportunity to do an internship in the US over the summer and to present the result for that paid internship at a meeting in Washington. We have the last 2 recipients here, from which I've learned a ton, because as you can imagine, they talk a lot about their experiences and their research during the application process, and also the faculty advisor, Dr. Ellis. The third opportunity for undergraduate students for funding at UMaine is the UDL scholarship. The UDL scholarship is available to students who are sophomore or junior. And it has kind of two categories. One is for students in the environment, and one is for students who are Native American and who plan to make an impact on tribal or health policy. The amount is $7,000 per year. I have here a picture of Nolan Outwater, who is our first student who receives an award in this for the UDL scholarship. He received an honorable mention. He's a Passamaquoddy student whose work is in tribal policy. I also work with Professor Darren Ranko as a faculty advisor for this scholarship. My second set of opportunities are opportunities for study abroad. And it might seem premature to you that we're talking about study abroad when, with the COVID situation, traveling is not really ideal, and in some cases really not possible. But as I mentioned earlier, because the time within when the application is submitted to the time when the funding becomes available is so long, it is still very important to put in the applications now, because when everything opens up again, then students will be able to travel. Those opportunities are the Killam Fellowship Program, the Gilman Scholarships, the Boren Undergraduate Scholarship, the Critical Languages Scholarships, and the George A. Mitchell International Peace Scholarship, which is the only scholarship where we offer support that is actually UMaine funding rather than external funding. The Killam Fellowship Program offers the opportunity to study for one semester in Canada in any discipline. And I have a picture of one of the recent recipients here. We actually had two recipients this last submission in 2020. And I work with Betsy Arnston as an advisor in the Canadian American Center. This scholarship is beautiful because once students get to Canada, they are welcome in the same group as the Fulbright students in Canada. So all the larger social events at the American Embassy and the various talks are held in conjunction with the Fulbright program. So it's a really great opportunity for students, and having received this scholarship makes them stronger in a future Fulbright application. We have next here the Gilman Scholarship. And the Gilman Scholarship offers an opportunity to study abroad for undergraduate students to any destination. This is for students who are on a Pell Grant. It's a great opportunities where the destination is not restricted. And we have had in just this last March, we have had 6 recipients. The advisor is Erica Clement at OIP and Connie Smith at Financial Aid. Now on to the next opportunities, which is the Boren Undergraduate Scholarship. This is an opportunity to study language and culture, mainly language, but also culture and sometimes other subjects in areas that are critical to the defense of the US. Students work for the US government when they come back for a year. And in general, students applying for this scholarship have the long-term goal of working for the US government. The funding is quite substantial. The stay abroad is long, is really 6 months or longer. unless, as some of you in the audience might be, you're STEM students, in which case you have the opportunity to just study on a Boren undergraduate scholarship for the summer. We have had a lot of success last year with this scholarship, which is actually available at the graduate level. And I have here a picture of Melissa Garand, who is a recipient of the Boren Fellowship to study Arabic in Jordan in 2020. Another amazing scholarship that has a deadline on November 17th. So we're really working on this one right now with an outreach event happening next Tuesday, the 6th at 11 o'clock, is the Critical Languages Scholarship. This is an opportunity to study language and culture in an area critical to the defense of the US for 8 to 10 weeks in the summer. So students are put in cohorts, and depending on the language level, and they spend their time abroad studying language in an immersive language environment. So a really boost to language skills for this one. All expenses are covered, so they vary from country to country. And we had our very first recipient at UMaine, Noah Faulkner, last year for Chinese. And given the situation, Noah had the chance to spend the summer on our virtual critical languages program while staying in the country. The last opportunity is the George A. Mitchell Peace Scholarship. This is not to be confused with the high school Mitchell Scholarship or with the graduate scholarship. This is an opportunity given by the University of Maine to spend one semester at University College Cork studying any discipline for students who really are strong in leadership and community service. We have had a recipient about really every year, one or two, and our last one is Bailey West. The advisor is Orlina Boteva at the Office of International Programs. My third set of opportunities here is a group of scholarships that students who are junior or rising seniors apply, and it allow them funding for a master's degree. So it's very important to think ahead. So if you're juniors starting your junior year, or if you are seniors, those opportunities might really be available to you. Truman and Madison are only for juniors. Fulbright and what I call the UK Ireland Awards are available for rising seniors. So students start those applications when they're finished their junior year. So very early. The first one of those opportunities is this Truman Scholarship. We're doing an outreach event next week on Wednesday on this one. It's for junior level students who have an extensive record of public and community service and whose goal is to work in community service in their future. Either it's in the government, but many in many nonprofits and other type of community service. They have to have lots of leadership potential, communication skills. The scholarship pays for a graduate degree in any type of master's in public service. We have had a few recipients in the past, and I work with Professor Mark Brewer on this scholarship. I also work with Professor Mark Brewer on the James Madison Fellowship. There is 50 of those fellowships, and they're given one per state every year. And they are for future teachers of American history, government, and civics in public schools, 7th to 12th grade, and it pays for a master's. And here it's an opportunity where at the University of Maine, we have had tremendous success and tremendous impact on students. If you just look at the student picture here, you have 3 recipients last year, Eric Miller, who went to Laos, Emily Craig, who went to Sri Lanka, and Jesse Walters, who went to Germany. And those are opportunity for study of or research abroad for about 1 year in about 140 different destinations. So a student can go immediately after they finish their undergrad. They can also go as graduate students, and they can either do a research program or teach English as a foreign language, or they can also earn a degree abroad. It's a really, really wonderful opportunity, which has at its core a cultural exchange. I co-advise on this one with Professor Christine Badel from anthropology. The application for this year is going in a couple of weeks, but in the spring, please watch out for several outreach events. I'll now move on to scholarship for studying in the UK and Ireland, the UK-Ireland Awards. Those 4 have in common the fact that students, to be competitive for those, really have to have had another major scholarship received prior. So for the Churchill Scholarship, which is for a master's in the UK, really a Goldwater award is kind of what typically we see. Those opportunities are listed here. We have the Churchill Scholarship. We have the Marshall, which is for study anywhere in the UK, and Professor Francois Mar advises on that one. And then we have the Graduate Mitchell Scholarship, which is for study anywhere in Ireland as graduate students. And then the very famous Rhodes Scholarship, where I work on with Professor Mac Hunter. And now I'm on to my last set of opportunities, and they are opportunities for graduate students who are already in graduate school. And some of them I really have mentioned earlier. The Critical Languages Scholarship and the Boren Fellowship are available to graduate students. And the application is very similar to the undergraduate one, except that the level of academics and writing is expected to be higher. The Fulbright, typically graduate students apply to the research award rather than the teaching assistantship or another degree, as you can imagine. For graduate students, I always wanted to mention the Phi Kappa Phi Awards. Phi Kappa Phi is an honor society to which students are invited. And when they join, there is really a long list of scholarships that become available that help them with funding, with dissertations, and so on. So we've been working on those as well. So I hope I've given you a little bit of an idea of what our office offers in terms of opportunity and what kind of support our office gives to students. I will close my presentation with this quote from a student applicant. Applying for the Fulbright led me to consider my own story and my personal motivation for pursuing scientific research more deeply than I had in the past. This was from a Fulbright applicant. I invite you to look at our website and follow us on Instagram and Facebook. And I hope that you will participate in one of our upcoming events. The CLS, Truman, Boren, and Goldwater info sessions are listed here. And the Zoom links to attend those meetings are on the website or on the social media. And I thank you for your attention.
Nevis, thank you very much for that wonderful presentation. And I just want to be one of the people that gets to congratulate you on such a job well done. And really, you've had such great success. And thank you for supporting our students in all of these efforts.
Thank you.
Of course. So now we'll just open up for any questions. So if you have questions, you can type them into the Q&A box and I'll moderate the question and answer session for Nevis. Nevis, I'm thinking maybe while we're waiting for questions to come in, if you want to talk a little bit more about some of the personal accounts maybe from the students about how these scholarships have really impacted them and how it really has changed the trajectory of their career aspirations. If you could maybe talk about that a bit.
The really wonderful stories are stories of students where I'm able to work with them from early on, and they come with a lot of motivation and some already research experience, and they're looking for ways to make that stronger. And it is very important, it has been very important for me to point them first and foremostly to the research opportunities at UMaine, and then to the internal scholarships that kind of build up their resume and their credential to then apply, let's say, for a Goldwater. So students with experience here, with an REU, with experience research outside of UMaine, become really very strong candidates for Goldwater. And one quote, I guess, that's just from last week, where I invited Alan Bays to come to the info session to Goldwater, and he wrote back from Harvard, where he started his PhD, and he said, "Oh, it's so nice to receive your email. I wouldn't be here at Harvard today starting my PhD if it hadn't been for this." So it's this kind of outcomes that we work for, and we find also that this kind of reflection on goals and being able to put them down in the essay really make them stronger for anything else they're applying to. So I see students, try an application, and it cannot always be successful, but it gives them a place to start, a skill to be able to apply for others, and where it is easier than, of course, when they went through the process once. So I've seen students really persevere and then get where they wanted.
Yeah, I agree. I love that. I think that it's such an important process to go through all of those skill building and professionalism. And I think it really helps the students to get their resumes and CVs and their cover letters ready when they're going to apply to graduate school or medical school or other types of professional schools, so that they can start working on those skills now, and they have the support from your office to really help refine all of those materials and make them very professional, because oftentimes students don't realize how important that is. And I think that that's something else that will come up later in this morning session when we hear from Saul Allen, when he talks about effective grant writing skills. It's all about how you present yourself and how you're presenting the work that you're doing. And we'll also hear more from the Career Center about networking and job search strategies. But I think all of this really ties together, because it's all about building skills in professionalism and really preparing students for future careers.
It does, yes.
I don't think we have any other questions. So if you would like to add anything else, Nevis, I'll just give you a final opportunity to say any final words that you might want.
Well, I really hope that I made some students interested in checking out our opportunities at the office, and I hope to see them at the upcoming events. And really, if you don't try for an application, you will never get an award. So that is a place to start. And that's the thing we guarantee, is that the process is going to be positive throughout. And thanks for the opportunity to present to this group.
Of course, Nevis, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And I hope that this allowed some students to learn about scholarship opportunities that maybe they have never heard of before, and maybe now they will go after it and reach out to your office. So thank you so much for joining us.
I hope so too. Bye.
At this point, we're going to take a very short break before we start our next session. So our next session will be Effective Grant Writing with Saul Allen, who is the Assistant Director of Research Development. And the highlights for this session are that you'll learn tips for identifying funding opportunities and effective grant writing skills. So we're going to take about a 9-minute break, and we're going to start around 10 o'clock and meet you back here. Good morning. It is my pleasure to introduce Saul Allen, the Assistant Director of Research Development, who will be presenting a workshop on effective grant writing. And during this workshop, we hope that you will learn tips for identifying funding opportunities and effective grant writing. Welcome, Saul.
Well, thank you very much for that welcome, and I'm delighted to be speaking to folks this morning. So a little bit, unfortunately, I recognize a lot of the names amongst the attendees, which suggests to me that there are many people who are sort of familiar with the material I'm going to present today. So this is not for you. This is for the people who don't know what I'm about to say. And again, thank you, Melissa, for that warm introduction, and thank you to all of the organizers and conveners of the University of Maine Student Symposium. So what I'm going to walk through, and like most folks, I will use a slide deck, is some broad principles that can guide the pursuit of external funding. It's kind of a, maybe it's intentional or a happy accident that I'm following Nevis, who was talking so much about fellowship opportunities and scholarship opportunities for individuals. And grant funded research is the companion to that. Funded research, instead of it being necessarily about the individual development of the scholar or researcher, is often about the generation of a new solution, of a new set of ideas, of a new set of practices that are an investment in an institution that is carried out by a researcher. So without too much further, hang on a moment here. And we are going to, I promise I will not be the first or the last person to pause unnaturally in the middle of speaking while I figure out what I'm doing here. All right, I assume I'm sharing my slide, and if I'm not, somebody will speak up and let me know.
It looks good.
Excellent. All right, so the first thing, as if the highlight said, I was going to talk about funding opportunity identification and effective writing. I don't want to fail on that promise, so I'm going to speak very briefly about funding opportunity identification. The reason I'm going to speak briefly is because the best way to identify a funding opportunity is to spend some time with a couple of specific tools, to get in contact with our office, to make contact with Jen Bonet at Fogler Library, and to develop a sort of a tailored solution for your funding needs. Because the funding opportunities that are going to be relevant to you will depend a lot on your institutional location. Are you a research assistant professor? Are you a rising junior doing your undergraduate degree? Are you, a tenured faculty member? Are you looking for multiple years of support for a major project, or are you trying to sort of find the resources necessary to complete a capstone? And so the funding needs that you have will shape the sorts of searches you do. So in very broad strokes, we have a subscription through the University of Maine to the Pivot database, which is a phenomenal resource that, again, can be used to tailor opportunity identification to your specific needs. And our office is happy to help you get set up with that. There's existing programming called Grants 101 that's led by my colleague Danielle O'Neill, as well as my colleague Jen Bonet at the library. And their next session is conveniently, 11 days from now? On October 13th, so I guess 12 days from now, from 10 to 11:30 a.m. And you can RSVP through the library, as the slide suggests. Our office also maintains a curated funding list. This is going to be most relevant to faculty who are looking for funding opportunities, but we strongly encourage you, if that applies to you, to take a look there. And the last thing is, if you are a student and you are interested in a specific grant, please connect with your advisor and ask for a referral to us. We are happy to work with students, both graduate students and undergraduates, through that sort of referral mechanism. Our office's mandate is to support the research enterprise writ large. And so that's why I'm speaking to you today. All right, so now let's talk about actually writing. And I'm grateful to my colleague Kimberly Goff and Danielle O'Neill, who put together a lot of the materials I'll be talking through in the next few minutes. A lot of the sort of tips that we talk about in grant writing actually apply to almost sort of any writing you do, but the stakes are a little bit higher. For a term paper or for a peer-reviewed journal article, you can get away with a lot of things that you really can't get away with in grant writing. And so one of the things we encourage folks to do at the outset is to understand some aspects of what the writing challenge is for grants. And so this means being prepared to convey your ideas effectively. So the first step on that is to ask yourself, why? Why me? Why now? Why here? And this is the sort of always the big question. Why does the person with the resources care? And so when you are doing that funding opportunity identification I mentioned briefly before, you're looking for a match between something you want to do and something the world wants done. And that has to be the through line that sort of anchors any writing you do within this genre, is the urgency and importance of your work for that audience. So these are some of the questions you want to ask yourself at the outset, right? And next, you want to know, well, who is it that I'm asking for this support from? And so these are some of the sort of sources of external research funding that we work with most closely. So this is federal agencies, state agencies or NGOs, private foundations, private individuals. And so I'll just sort of walk through this table without reading it at you, but sort of highlighting a couple of features. So there are a lot of federal agencies. Depending on who you ask, there are 26 federal agencies that are sort of directly sponsor research, or there's many, many more. I think the federal government says there's 26 agencies, the interagency. And federal funding for research is a major support. There are probably many of you in this audience who are supported on some level by federal research dollars. Now that could be directly through a scholarship or a program, that could be indirectly through an RA-ship or a TA-ship or perhaps work study that is sponsored by federal agencies. And so this is a major source, but it's not the only source. And federal grants come with federal regulations. So there is often a substantial administrative burden to pursuing federal support for research. That's not a problem. That's something that our office, in collaboration with the Office of Research Administration, are always happy to help people problem solve, but it's just something to be aware of. And so when you're thinking about federal agencies, they're not a monolith. What the Department of Defense wants is not necessarily what the USDA wants. And within the Department of Defense, the specific program or the specific program manager will have their own priorities. And so we'll talk a little bit more about knowing your funder and knowing the programming. So these are some of those other sources I mentioned: industry, private foundations, individuals and families. And so with some of these, often the scale of funding changes versus a federal agency. Not always, but often. But the sort of administrative burden or the types of writing that will succeed will reflect those audiences. A lot of private foundations are willing to support operating expenses. Very few federal agencies will support operating expenses. By operating expenses, I mean keeping the lights on for your research enterprise. Private foundations may also engage in more of a dialogue in the development of your proposal. They may want to see it early. They may want sort of a detailed letter of intent, and they may want an opportunity to shape the direction that you take your pitch. Industry, similarly, will often have very concrete needs for which they're supporting research. And so they are asking, often through contracts, for the delivery of a research product, which is different than the basic or fundamental research that we might look to a federal agency for. Individuals and families, like industries and foundations, may be supporting research for a variety of reasons, but you're going to understand those reasons by entering into sort of direct conversation with that sponsor. So these are the kinds of questions you ask yourself before you ask somebody for money. Who has this funder supported in the past? What do they understand as their own mission? And so this is when you look at those documents that most organizations will have on their website, where they define like mission and vision, or they have value statements, or they have a detailed sort of memos on their funding priorities. And you want to sort of see, are the things they're interested in what I'm interested in doing? And we always want to encourage people to be writing, but we want to discourage sort of force-fitting a project for a funder that's probably not interested in that kind of work. And so, for instance, many organizations, and this is true for federal agencies or private foundations, industry groups or families, will also tell you what they don't fund. And if what you're proposing is something they don't fund, then they're not the right fit. It's very, very useful to look at what are the sizes of awards they've made in the past. And there you want to look for what are the awards typically like. If you looked up a private foundation and you saw that they had just written a check for $10 million to University X to perform research Y, you wouldn't necessarily think, oh, my project is of that same scale. You would want to look and say, well, most of their investments in research have been sort of in this range. So if my project could be delivered in that same range, then they're a good fit. The last thing to ask yourself is, what is the review? How does the review process work, or what does it look like? What are the elements of their review process? And this is essential because you are writing to the reviewers first and foremost. They are your primary audience. They may be peers in your field, they may be near peers, or they may be non-specialist reviewers who are looking at your work for alignment with a foundation or for eligibility for a particular cause. And so understanding the review process will help you tailor those materials. Now, not all funders have multiple programs, but most foundations and most agencies will organize their grant making under the rubric of a program. And so just like we want to know our funders, we want to sort of know the specific program. And if that program is motivated by a challenge or has a mandate, you want to make sure your proposed work aligns with that mandate. This is another place where you start looking at, well, who is the contact for that program? Not just for that foundation or that agency, but for that specific program. Is there a contact? Can I be in conversation with that person? This is another place where you ask questions like, do I need a collaborator? Do I need to enter into a partnership? Is this program a gateway to future funding? Can I use this program to sort of establish a beachhead in a particular research area? And again, some of these questions may seem very distant and abstract if you're looking to fund a specific project in the near term. But these are the kinds of questions that will shape your writing. Another key point, and I really sort of want to emphasize that this comes from my colleague Kim Goff, is the centrality of investing in relationships during the proposal development process. And those relationships are not just between you and your work, and they're not just between you and your collaborators, but they involve, if you're a faculty member, they may involve students or graduate students. If you're a student, other students, other PIs, evaluators, if there's an evaluation component, and increasingly more and more grants and more different domains demand some measure of evaluation. You need to sort of count what matters and speak plausibly about how you are changing something that matters to the funder. Other relationships might be with program officers or managers, with pre-award staff who are supporting that proposal. If you're applying from the University of Maine, that would be folks in the Office of Research Administration, or perhaps folks in our office, the Office of Research Development. All of these sorts of relationships are going to enhance that process. There is a temptation for many people to want to sort of take the material, craft it to a place that they feel comfortable with it, and then share it with the world. And that strategy is less successful then having frequent communication with all of the other parties to the proposal. We're going to talk about that a little bit more when we go through. These are some pitfalls. I don't want to linger here too long. A lot of them are somewhat straightforward. So a solution in search of a problem. This comes up a lot where you have a really neat doodad and you don't know what that neat doodad does in the world, but you want it to do something. And so you start shopping around for somebody who will pay for you to develop it. That's a really natural tendency. Again, it tends to be less successful. Lack of alignment is really, really key. If you are proposing good work, but that good work is not what the funder wants to accomplish, then it does not matter how persuasively you pitch your project. Astute reviewers will look at it and will see that lack of alignment, and you'll be dinged in your reviews. Another thing that can be a real pitfall where you put a lot of sort of heart, soul, and energy into a proposal is the sort of feeling of frustration or the poor attitude that other people don't understand it. And the thing is, as a grant writer, it is always your responsibility to be understood. It is not the reviewer's responsibility to catch up to your writing. You cannot depend on them to do research outside of your proposal, which means all of the information they need has to be there. You can't depend on them to sort of hold in their random access memory, to hold in their RAM an idea you said on page 2 that you return to on page 8. Grant writing rewards clarity. I had a long time ago in a faraway place, I had a writing professor tell me it is better to be clear than to be president. And I think that's true. And that's certainly true in the grant writing endeavor. If you can be clear, then you will help the reviewers correctly identify what's novel and interesting about your work and whether or not it aligns with their mission and purpose. Again, there's some other pitfalls on here. These are the sorts of things that you would want to consider. And a lot of this will depend on your audience. This is another point that seems very obvious, but it matters, right? So in our office, we're really sort of focused on helping people access the resources they need to accomplish interesting research, important research. For researchers, that's not where it stops. It doesn't stop once you've gotten the resources you need to complete that work. That's where those relationships with the funder need to be sort of continued and cultivated. That's whether that's filing financial reports, progress updates, writing useful documents. Let's say it's an internal funding opportunity through the University of Maine. If you write about the cool thing that you and your team did, then that's gold. That's information the university needs so that it can talk to your peers, that it can talk to supporters outside of the university ecosystem about the interesting things that are happening here. That's not just an administrative burden. I got to file this report. That's one of the many ways that you sort of invest in that relationship and sort of keep the process flowing. So here are like some, again, I don't think anyone attending today will be surprised by these, but if you had these on a sticky note when you set out to write a grant, you would do very well. So timeline, practicing your pitch if there's a verbal element, understanding what has been funded, not leaving your budget for last. Again, for an individual fellowship with prescribed terms where you're applying for a grant program, it's understandable that you're not thinking about budget. But for any sort of sponsored research where you are required to submit a budget, looking at that budget early and often will help shape the programming you propose. So there is a constraint, right? There's two sort of key constraints on your research, which is time and money. And you need to be aware of both as you write. You do not want to be in the unfortunate position of at the 11th hour trying to cut things out of your proposal to meet a sponsor's budget cap. So budget early. And a back of the envelope budget will get you within an order of magnitude of the correct budget, and that's really what you need. Line up peer reviewers. This is absolutely true whether you're writing as a student or as a faculty member. If you have colleagues read your work, especially if you have critical colleagues read your work, then they're going to alert you to things that would have been missed in your own development process because you know what you want to say. And because you know what you want to say, you can't see where you're not saying it. Watch your language. This is less about cursing and more about accessibility, avoiding sort of burdensome acronyms, disciplinarily specific jargon, backing up your work. And so you want to present your research as part of an ongoing discussion in your field. You really, and I think this is on the pitfalls, you really don't want to stake a claim for your proposed work by poo-pooing the efforts of somebody else. You don't want to come in and say, you know, many people in the field have said XYZ, but they're wrong, and I propose ABC. Because there's a decent chance that somebody who said XYZ or believes XYZ or built their career on XYZ will be reading your proposal about ABC. So like your collaborators, that seems like sometimes a tall order, but if you like the people who you bring into that partnership, it will be so much easier to get a competitive and compelling proposal out the door. Over communicate to the team. That means when things change, when deadlines are coming up, when you need specific writing tasks from other members of your team, letting them make the decision not to do something is so much better than not realizing that they have to do it. And so the more communication, the better. White space and effective visuals. I'm sad that we only give this sort of one line. White space is your friend. Anyone who has to review your grant has to review a number of other grants. And at a certain point, the sheer volume of text becomes overwhelming. White space gives the reader a chance to pause, to reflect on what you've said, and to sort of engage with your writing on their own terms, and they will feel respected as a reader. And so there's nothing more disheartening than sort of being 3 or 4 hours into a task and coming to a document that is 10 single-space pages that's just a wall of sort of 10-point font, and sort of the desire to engage with that just dissipates instantly. So white space and effective visuals. Why effective visuals? You know, picture's worth 1,000 words. It's more than that. Is if you use the right diagrams or the right illustrations, you give that reader an anchor. You know, what was so-and-so's work about? And the first thing they're going to remember is not sort of your highly detailed 5 specific aims. They're going to remember the little sort of graphic with 3 elements that illustrates the process. All right. So these are the qualities of highly successful proposal writers. We work with a lot of proposal writers. A lot of different people have different styles. There are many, many ways to succeed at grant writing, but these are common for most people who do. So they're organized, they're concise, they know their audience, they're relationship oriented, they're willing to invest time. They're not just sort of throwing their work out into the world and hoping it sticks, but they're making sort of conscious, planful decisions to align their work with specific opportunities. Humble and humility, you know, it made it onto this list. I think humility is phenomenal. You know, it's great to work with people who are humble. I don't think within the writing of your grant, I don't think humility is the most important value. I think sort of a frank and candid assessment of why your work is important and why the funder should care is key. So humility here is more with your collaborators. All right, so this is my contact. I've sort of launched into a 23-minute tirade on grant writing. I would love to hear questions if there are questions, but also sort of experiences with proposal development you may have had and where you've found success. One of the sort of key messages I want to underscore before I turn it over to Q&A is that grant writing is a learnable skill. And so some people come into it with a sort of a lot of experience with journalistic prose and with persuasive writing, and they take to it very easily. And some folks come to it with a very different sort of writerly background. And in both cases, we can improve and enhance those people's proposals. It's not an art. There is artistry to it, but it is a learnable skill. And it is something that people are eligible regardless of their current location within the university system. It is something that is available to them. Again, our office primarily works with faculty, but if you are a student and you are interested in pursuing a grant, we would love to hear from you. And the best way to do that is with a warm referral from a faculty advisor or research mentor who you already have. So with that, I'll turn it back to Melissa, who I believe is facilitating the Q&A.
So thank you so much for that excellent presentation. There were lots of great tips. I was taking lots of mental notes, and I think lots of great life advice in there too that we can all relate to. So we'd be happy to take any questions. If you have any questions, you can put them in the Q&A box, and I would be moderating those. So feel free to ask questions, and it's great that Saul provided also his contact information, so you can reach out to him in the future. One thing that I was kind of wondering about is whether you could give some advice to people who feel a little intimidated or hesitant to go after grant opportunities. I think that sometimes people just, feel like, there's no way I would ever get this, or maybe I'm not worthy of this particular grant opportunity. So any words of wisdom that you could provide to students who are feeling reluctant?
So I think if you find yourself feeling intimidated by the process, that's natural and that makes sense. And typically we're going to feel intimidated when we don't know what we're doing and we don't know why we're doing it. And there is no better way to get a grant than to write a grant. And so often what we'll do with faculty, and I can't promise my office, but I can personally promise some of my time if there are students who are interested in doing this, is we'll do an interview. And sometimes it's easier for you to correct my interpretation of your goals than it is to look at that sort of blank page and to feel like that pressure of, I need to produce a compelling document and I've got all of this white space just glaring at me. So what we'll do is we'll say, okay, what do you want to accomplish? What would it take for you to accomplish it? What's new and interesting about the method you propose? What are the funders' goals? And can you speak the funders' language to them about your research objectives? So we're going to ask questions like that. And you don't have to write anything. I'm going to, click and clack away. And then at the end of half an hour, 45 minutes, I'm going to send you that document. And that will be an outline of your proposal narrative. You can go through that and you can say, well, Saul thought I wanted to look at, this element of microscopy, but actually I'm more interested in this element of imaging. So then you fix it, right? But sometimes it's easier to correct somebody else's synopsis of our work than to start out with a blank page. Now, of course, you don't have to do that with me too, right? There may be somebody you are more comfortable engaging with that process, but sort of entering into a dialogue or talking through what you would like to accomplish is a great way to start that writing.
I think that's a great point, because oftentimes we write something down and then someone says, tell me what you're actually trying to do. And then when you restate it in a way that the person can understand it, I think we oftentimes overcomplicate it when we're writing it. And then when we simplify it and just break it down into what our goals are, I think that kind of language actually is much more effective than trying to write it in this really complicated way where you're trying to impress people. I think simple is always better, and just communicating your message really clearly. So that's really great, helpful advice. Thank you.
No, that's a phenomenal way to look at it, right? Is simplicity, and whatever will help you get to that place of simplicity faster. If that is a conversation, then by all means do a conversation. And in terms of feeling eligible for grant opportunities, this is something that people at all sorts of career stages struggle with. And there is, for most funders, most of the time, the majority of proposals that are declined in our current environment are worthy proposals. So a decline is not a statement on the value of your research. And sort of, it's impossible to do up front, but learning to sort of take that perceived rejection and sort of pivot a little bit and say, well, now I have a complete grant proposal. What else can I do with this? And maybe it's writing an article, and maybe if you're a student, it's sending it to a different funder. But accepting that the ultimate judgment of the funder is not on the merit of you as the scholar or the value of your work. It is a more complicated decision-making process than that.
Absolutely. So learning how to not take things personally and realizing that it's all part of the process and that we all go through this, because funding is incredibly competitive. And we learned so much through that process. And like you said, once you have the grant ready, you can usually repurpose that and use it for future opportunities. And then you've got it ready if there's a call that comes out. And, you know, I think that that's time very well spent, even if the grant doesn't end up getting funded. So thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. It was great to have you here, and thank you for offering to be a contact for our students in the future.
Really appreciate it, and thank you to all of the organizers for convening this.
Of course. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the workshop on the science behind COVID-19. My name is Melissa McGinnis, and I am an associate professor of microbiology in the Department of Molecular and Biomedical Sciences at the University of Maine. And I'm also the associate director of the Center for Undergraduate Research. And recently I have been serving as the lead scientist for the UMaine System COVID-19 Scientific Advisory Board. And that has been a really great opportunity to work with researchers from the University of Maine and the University of Southern Maine so that we can provide science-based evidence to the University of Maine system leadership that can help guide them as they navigate the very complicated COVID-19 pandemic. And today, what I'd like to talk to you about is really the science behind the COVID-19 pandemic. And we all know how much this pandemic has impacted our lives. And I want to talk to you about the ways in which it has impacted our lives, the science behind the virus that is causing this disease, and really how quickly research has been able to respond to this pandemic and help us to battle the pandemic. And if we think about where we were in February and March when things were just starting to ramp up in the United States to where we are now, and realize how much we have learned in a very short period of time, in just 7 months. And really that is a testament to the dedication of the biomedical and medical researchers, people in the scientific community who have really rolled up their sleeves to try to help combat this pandemic. So these images probably look familiar to you because we were seeing all of these images when the COVID-19 outbreak first started. We know that the COVID-19 outbreak started in Wuhan, China, and it was originally called the novel coronavirus. We saw images like this from the coronavirus outbreak that really took over the entire world. And now we're starting to see messaging that can help with public health measures so that we can help prevent the spread of COVID-19 within our own communities. So the timeline of the COVID-19 pandemic really started in December of 2019. And that's why it's called COVID-19, is because it started in 2019. Of course, it's continuing on into 2020, and it might continue on into 2021. But really, in the beginning of December 2019, the first patient developed symptoms of Wuhan coronavirus. But at the time, we didn't know that this was a novel coronavirus. It was a pneumonia-like illness. And after some investigation, and since there were a cluster of individuals who came down with this pneumonia-like illness, China had alerted the World Health Organization about several pneumonia cases. And this happened on December 31st, 2019. And I remember very well when this was happening because I'm a virologist and I've been studying how viruses infect cells for about the past 20 years. And I was teaching a graduate virology course when this really was starting. So right in January of 2020, my graduate students were coming in telling me all of the news that they were seeing on Twitter about the novel coronavirus, and we were talking about how things might end up going. And at the time, we had no idea really what we were in for. I was thinking that it seemed very similar to some other coronavirus outbreaks that had happened in Asia, and that it might fizzle out like those had. And I have been very surprised to see what actually has occurred with the COVID-19 pandemic. In the beginning, it had been clustered back to some cases at the Wuhan wholesale seafood market. There were a number of people who became sick with the coronavirus that were linked to that seafood market, so it was thought that perhaps that's where the outbreak started. On January 7th, it was identified as a novel coronavirus, and it's called SARS-CoV-2, SARS coronavirus 2, and COVID-19 stands for coronavirus disease 19. So that's the disease that the virus causes. And just looking at this timeline, it's really remarkable to see that the World Health Organization was alerted on December 31st. And by January 7th, we had a sequence of the virus and we knew that it was a novel coronavirus. That's how quickly the researchers were responding to the novel coronavirus outbreak. The first death for the coronavirus outbreak was recorded on January 11th. And then we started to see coronavirus spreading out of Wuhan into other parts of China and then into other parts of the world. We started to see it spread into Europe and then eventually into the United States. And I just want to point out that right here on January 29th, the death toll at that point was about 132,000. And when I show you the update on where we are now, we're going to see actually how bad it has gotten. So this really was kind of a time in history, a time to remember, I think. And I think that we're all going to remember where we were sitting when we first started to hear about the coronavirus outbreak. There were PPE shortages, so you may have seen images like this where people in the healthcare industry were wearing trash bags to protect themselves. People were reusing their face shields and face coverings because we didn't have enough PPE in the hospitals to respond to the patients that had COVID-19. There was a lack of testing, so we had not yet developed tests in order to diagnose the coronavirus. And therefore, people were going undetected and they weren't getting treatment when they needed to be treated. And there was a significant burden on the healthcare system. So there were so many unanswered questions in the beginning. How does COVID-19 spread? How many people are going to contract COVID-19? Could we predict? How and when do we test people for the virus? How do we treat COVID-19? What is the mortality rate going to be? What are the long-term effects of this illness? And will people develop immunity? There were so many unanswered questions. And we really didn't know how to treat this virus infection. We didn't know how to do the diagnostic testing. There weren't enough tests available. And there was a fear that we were going to burden the healthcare industry. And so we were all called to flatten the curve. And really the goal for flattening the curve was to reduce the number of daily cases so that we would reduce the burden on the healthcare system, because we could not overburden the capacity that we had at hand, because we knew that a number of individuals who were becoming sick with the novel coronavirus were actually developing pneumonia, and they were ending up in the intensive care units and oftentimes needed to be placed on a ventilator. And there were only so many ventilators and so many ICU beds. And so we had to ensure that we didn't overburden the healthcare capacity. And so at this time, you maybe were sitting in class and were told that after spring break, you shouldn't return back to campus because everything was going online. Maybe you were still in high school and you were told that you were going to start doing school remotely. And I think that we all can kind of remember that as a time in history where we were all called to really play our part by staying home and flattening the curve so that we can help protect people within our community and protect our healthcare workers. We take a look at the current situation for the COVID-19 pandemic worldwide. Just taking a look at this map, you can see that the red dots are indicating areas where there are cases of COVID-19. So you can see that the United States is very heavily red, and also South America, Europe, and parts of Asia. Worldwide, there have been now, as of last night, over 34 million cases and over 1 million deaths. We take a look at the United States, and we're looking at this map really where if you look, you can see areas that are white. Those are few or no cases. And the light yellow, those are the average number of daily cases per 100,000 people in the past week. And so looking at the yellow area, you can see that's a low number of cases. And as you move to red, that indicates a high number of cases in those areas. In the United States, there have been over 7 million cases and over 207,000 deaths. If we zoom in even further and take a look at the state of Maine, we realize that we're very fortunate to live in the state of Maine because we've only had 5,000 or so cases and 142 deaths in our state. So this is not the first pandemic that we have experienced. And if we look at the history of pandemics and think about what is an actual pandemic, I think it helps to put things into perspective. So a pandemic is a disease that becomes prevalent over the whole country or over an entire world. So it's widespread. And over the time in history, you probably have heard about things like bubonic plague or Black Death, which took the lives of 200 million people, or the smallpox pandemic, which took the lives of 56 million. But as we move closer to the time frame in which we have been alive, then we can remember some of these outbreaks that actually happened more recently, like the swine flu outbreak, H1N1, SARS coronavirus outbreak, and the MERS coronavirus outbreak. I think that many of you probably remember the Ebola virus outbreak, and these were all pandemics. So what actually leads to the emergence or re-emergence of these viral infections? Some of them we've heard of before, and we know these viruses very well, and they actually re-emerge. In some cases, these are completely novel viruses that are emerging for the first time. So why is this happening? If you take a look at the map, you can see these newly emerging viral infections in yellow and the re-emerging ones that are in orange. And really, this is because of developments and changes in the environment, our own growth in population and migrations, ecological disturbances, so thinking a lot about how we interact with our world, the health and fitness and stress that we're placing on organisms, the genetic variation within the virus itself, and really our own proximity and population growth and rapid travel. All of these are a recipe for emerging and newly re-emerging viral infections. Some of them that we have heard about probably in the more recent news are things like swine flu. And the swine flu outbreak was caused by influenza virus H1N1. And although influenza virus circulates every year, sometimes a new strain of influenza circulates that actually can be more infectious or more deadly. And H1N1 was responsible for 60 million cases in the United States and about 12,000 deaths. I think that many of you probably remember these images of the Ebola virus outbreak, which happened in 2014, 2016, and there were 28,000 cases and 11,000 deaths. We all have these images of Zika virus that we remember from the Zika virus outbreak in 2015, which is spread by mosquitoes and is the cause of microcephaly in infants. And this is caused when a pregnant woman becomes infected with Zika virus, and it can be transmitted to the baby. We have had some coronavirus outbreaks, and that includes the SARS coronavirus outbreak, which happened in 2002, caused about 8,000 cases, and was largely isolated in Asia and China for the most part. And the MERS coronavirus outbreak in 2012. And the MERS coronavirus outbreak, there were about 2,500 cases. And then we started to hear about SARS-CoV-2. And this is the virus that's responsible for COVID-19. So in the beginning, there were questions about whether this was similar to the SARS coronavirus or the MERS coronavirus. Were they similar? Was it the same virus that had mutated? And so when they actually took a look at the sequence of the virus, they determined that SARS coronavirus 2 was a novel virus, and it was different from the SARS coronavirus, and that's why they named it SARS-CoV-2. SARS-CoV and MERS-CoV didn't really lead to a very high number of cases or a significant number of deaths. However, as you know, the COVID-19 has actually resulted in over 34 million cases. So it's much more transmissible, and it is also more pathogenic than the SARS and MERS coronavirus, just based on the number of people. However, the SARS and MERS coronavirus actually were more fatal in the individuals that were infected. But these aren't the only coronaviruses that circulate in the population. There are a number of other coronaviruses that are listed here that cause very mild symptoms like the common cold. And when we take a look, we can actually group them into the highly pathogenic and the low pathogenic coronaviruses. And we can start to determine how these viruses actually have emerged in nature. And the primary host reservoir for these coronaviruses is actually bats. And the highly pathogenic coronaviruses, the bats often spread the virus to an intermediate host, and then it's spread into the human population. From there, it can then spread from human to human. The low pathogenic coronaviruses may spread either directly from bats or may go through an intermediate host. Why is this significant, this coronavirus emergence from bats? Well, it turns out that bats actually harbor lots of viruses, and 35% of the bat virome is coronaviruses. So we've heard about the microbiome, which are the bacteria that make up our skin and the lining of our intestine, but we actually also have a virome, and 35% of the virome in the bat is coronavirus in nature. There are 400 novel strains of coronaviruses in bats, and it's been determined that these bat coronaviruses can directly infect human cells. So while they may have an intermediate host, they also can go directly from bats straight into human cells. Looking specifically at a species of bat called the horseshoe bat, they recovered 7 SARS-like coronaviruses from that particular bat. And what's interesting is when we look at the SARS-CoV-2 virus that causes COVID-19, we see that it has a 96% sequence identity to viruses in horseshoe bats. But it also has a 91% sequence identity to a pangolin virus. And what in the heck is a pangolin? Pangolin is a scaly anteater. It's a mammal that inhabits Asia and Africa. So it's thought that either the SARS coronavirus came directly from bats, or it potentially had an intermediate host stopover in the pangolin and was then transmitted into humans. How do we know this? Well, we can take a look actually at the sequence. And we can align the sequence of the bat coronavirus, the pangolin coronavirus, and the SARS-CoV-2, and look for particular signatures within that sequence. And I know that this might look a little bit overwhelming, but what I always tell my students is to look for patterns. And if you look for these patterns, you can see highlighted in the blue boxes that there are a high degree of similarities between the SARS coronavirus 2 and the bat coronavirus and pangolin. But there are these matchups between the human SARS-CoV-2 and the pangolin virus that are not seen in the bat. And this would suggest that there was some kind of recombination event that occurred in the intermediate host, most likely in the pangolin. But this is still an area of active investigation. So what happened when the coronavirus spread into humans? It started to cause symptoms, and these are the symptoms that we now describe as COVID-19 symptoms: fever, cough, shortness of breath, even diarrhea, muscle aches, headaches, sore throat, and new loss of taste or smell. These are the symptoms that we should all be looking for each day to determine whether or not we should be leaving our homes. And in some cases, people can resolve these symptoms and they can return back to their normal health within a few weeks. But in other cases, there are these long-term effects. And so sometimes these symptoms can be long-lasting, or they can have these other effects, including neurological symptoms, lung scarring, and weakened heart. And of course, we know that COVID-19 can also lead to mortality. There's an increased risk for severe disease in the elderly and also in those with underlying medical conditions like obesity and diabetes and other conditions. So for a virus to be able to infect a host, it has to be able to attach to a host cell and invade that host cell. And this is what I find fascinating about studying viruses. So when we're thinking about what kind of research we want to get involved in, if you're a new student and you're thinking, I want to get involved in research, but I don't know exactly what I want to do, you can think about research as a bit of an art. And some people may find one particular piece of art really compelling, and maybe others are not really moved by that piece of art. But when I look at the virus infectious cycle, I think it's stunning. And this is because viruses cannot infect, they cannot infect on their own. They have to use all of the machinery that the host cell provides. They're called obligate intracellular parasites. And the reason why is because they have to use all this host cell machinery in order to attach to the cell. They have to get across the cell plasma membrane. Once they get into the cell, they have to traffic to the proper compartment so that it can then replicate its genome. And then once it replicates its genome within the cell, it turns the cell into a viral replication factory where it makes new virions that can then go out and get released to infect new cells and new hosts. So viruses are like hitchhikers. And if they don't have a host cell, they're not going to be able to move on to the next place. We take a look at the structure of SARS-CoV-2. We can actually do a very simplified model using an orange and frilly toothpicks, which is something that I did with my daughter during the coronavirus pandemic. When we were stuck at home, she wanted to learn more about SARS-CoV-2. And so we drew this little structure up and we were talking about the pathogenesis in the lung. And then we decided to make a model with the orange. So on the orange, the little frilly toothpicks are representing the spike glycoprotein. And that's shown here in this image in yellow. Those little glycoproteins actually are responsible for allowing the virus to attach to the host cells. If we cut that orange in half and take a look inside the center, what we can see is the viral genome. So you can see the viral RNA genome, which is shown here, and it's wrapped in a nucleoprotein called the N protein. So this virus actually is surrounded in a layer of lipids or fats known as an envelope. And some viruses have envelopes and some do not. But this particular virus does have an envelope, and that's where those spike glycoproteins are actually inserted. When SARS-CoV-2 infects a cell, it uses those spike glycoproteins to bind to particular receptors on the surface of the cell called ACE2 and TMPRSS2. I'm going to call it T2 for short. When it interacts with those receptors, this allows the virus to be taken up into the cell so it can cross over that plasma membrane. And then once it gets into the cell, it actually sheds this outer layer, the envelope, and it releases the viral RNA into the cell. Because this is a plus strand RNA virus, it's just like mRNA, so it can begin translating those proteins, and it can make new viral proteins within the cell. Once the viral proteins are produced, they then get trafficked over into the ER and Golgi. And this is really important for the post-translational modifications of those proteins. In addition, the viral genome gets copied within the cell. This is a process called replication. And when the viral genome gets copied and these new proteins are getting built over here in the ER and Golgi, they then meet up in particular vesicles within the cell, and the virus gets assembled. When the virus gets assembled, now those proteins can encase the virus and it can encase the viral genome. Then the virus gets released from the cell and it can go on to infect new cells and new hosts. That's the infectious life cycle of a SARS coronavirus too. So one thing that I wanted to talk about, of course, I was asked to talk about the science of COVID-19, but there are many different things that I could talk about, but I thought I would talk a little bit about receptors because that's what we study in my laboratory. We study how viruses attach to cells, how they get into cells, and then once they get in, how do they really move around and take over the host cell. So I find this process to be really fascinating. And when we compare SARS-CoV that caused the SARS outbreak with SARS-CoV-2, which causes COVID-19, we can see that there are a number of similarities. And the attachment receptor for both of these is something called ACE2, which stands for angiotensin converting enzyme 2. And it also requires this T2. And T2 is a serine protease, and it helps to prime the spike protein on the surface of the virus so that it can infect cells. So I know that this might look a little bit overwhelming, but remember, you're just looking for patterns. So if you look for patterns and you're looking for the size and the color of these dots, then what you can see is that there is a high level of expression of ACE2, the receptor for these viruses, in cells in the nasal passage and also in the lower airway. So what we know is that ACE2 is expressed in lungs, and we know that's highly expressed in the nasal epithelium, and this makes those sites in the body really susceptible to infection. And the virus is spread in respiratory droplets, and when it's spread in respiratory droplets, it can then be transmitted into the nose and lungs, and it can infect those cells. But in addition to that, these receptors are also expressed in the heart and kidney and intestine, and also in adipose tissue. And that's why we're seeing that there are really significant effects with the coronavirus infection that aren't just limited to the lung or to the nose, but actually it's a multi-organ disease, and it's also a disease of the blood vessels. And this is what leads to very severe illness in some individuals. If we take a look at the cells where we see high level of expression of this receptor, we can see over here on the right that those are the cells that become infected with the virus, and that is shown in red. So what I'm going to tell you about now is the things that we've learned about COVID-19 and what we can do to prevent COVID-19 spread and transmission. We know that when someone is infected with SARS-CoV-2, they can release droplets into the air when they are coughing, sneezing, even just breathing, talking. And when those droplets are released into the air, they can land into the nose, mouth, or lungs of another individual. They can also land on surfaces and objects, and that's why it's really important that we are always washing our hands after we touch things, before we eat, after we use the restroom. And these droplets actually can spread up to 3 to 6 feet, and the droplets are released from the individual, and inside that droplet are the viruses that are going to cause the infection. In addition, people can release these microdroplets or aerosols that can spread even further than 6 feet. So we see this kind of messaging. And the reason is because there's science behind this messaging. We know the virus can spread up to 6 feet. That's why we have to physically distance. We know that wearing face coverings actually can protect the virus from, it can protect us from infection with the virus. And that washing our hands, actually we can stop the spread of coronavirus after we have touched an object that might be contaminated. What we also have learned about coronavirus spread is that about 50% of people that have COVID-19 don't even have symptoms. And when you become infected with SARS-CoV-2, there's an incubation period where the virus has actually infected you, but you don't know it yet. And it can be anywhere from 2 to 14 days. And during that time, the virus is replicating and you can be shedding and transmitting it to others, but you may feel healthy, and so you may not even know. Then some people will become symptomatic, and at that time, those people would probably stay home because they're not feeling well. But the issue is that when people are not, they don't know that they're infected, they can be out and about and spreading the virus to others. Once people become symptomatic, the disease progression and complications really varies by individual. So our public health measure to really reduce the transmission of COVID-19 is to test widely. That's because we don't know when someone may be infected with COVID-19, or if they are potentially symptomatic, then we want to know that it's COVID-19 so that they can stay home and isolate themselves and prevent further spread to others. In addition, we contact anyone who was a close contact of that person through contact tracing, and then those people are asked to quarantine for 14 days. And this is a great way to help reduce the transmission of COVID-19. COVID-19 transmission has been really difficult to tackle because usually when we're thinking about how infectious a virus is, we talk about the R0 value, which is the mathematical calculation or basic reproduction number of viruses. If you are infected, how many people will you infect with a particular virus? For COVID-19, it's about 2.5. But the reason why it has been really challenging to model this and predict it is because there are other factors with COVID-19 transmission, including the dispersion factor, and there have been lots of disease clusters and super spreader events that suggest that 10 to 20% of cases might actually lead to 80% of the virus spread. And risk is actually 20 times higher indoors. So there are a number of complicating factors with COVID-19 transmission that don't really fit into other R0 or basic reproduction numbers of diseases. So the advice really is to avoid the 4 C's to reduce COVID-19 transmission. Avoid closed spaces, crowded places, close contact, and contact time. I just want to talk 1 more minute about some of the other measures that researchers have taken to combat COVID-19. So there are almost 600 treatments and therapeutics that are currently in development. We don't have any that are approved by the FDA at this time. but we do have a few that are under emergency use authorization, and that includes convalescent plasma. That would be antibodies from someone who recovered and then giving that to someone who's ill with COVID-19, and an antiviral called remdesivir. Some new therapies that are in phase 3 trials are antibodies to really block that interaction between the spike protein and the ACE2 receptor on the cell. And if we can block that interaction in patients who have mild to moderate disease, then that will also serve as a really effective treatment. There are over 212 vaccines that are currently in development. There are a number of various COVID-19 platforms for vaccination, and 6 of these are our top candidates in the United States. 5 of these are in phase 3 clinical trials. It's likely that if a vaccine is actually effective, that it might be approved sometime early 2021. There's some SARS-CoV-2 research going on here at the University of Maine, and some that I may not be aware of, but the ones that I have been involved in are listed here. So we have some molecular biology research, engineering, and medical research to really understand more about the virus in wastewater that gets shed from individuals that are infected, to understand how the virus is transmitted in the environment and in the healthcare setting. So I'll just close by reminding you all to honor the Black Bear Pact. If you have not yet signed it, go and look at umaine.edu/return. Remember to wear your face coverings, wash your hands, and to practice physical distancing. And I would be happy to answer any questions. You can put them in the Q&A, or you can contact me at any time. Thank you. If there aren't any questions, I would invite you to reach out to me if you have any questions in the future. And it's now my pleasure to introduce Samantha Wheeler, who is a career counselor in the Career Center. And she's going to tell us about networking and job search strategies so that we can learn some important networking strategies and tips for the job search process. Samantha.
All righty. Hello, everyone. So I'm going to attempt to share my screen and see if that works. Okay, let's see now. And I hit present. Awesome. Okay. So, hi, everybody. So my name is Samantha Wheeler. I am the STEM and Health Professions Career Counselor at the Career Center. And today I'm really going to focus on how to continue to network and what kind of job search strategies could, students right now be utilizing, especially during a pandemic. Obviously, a lot of things right now are having to be done remote or are not really being done at all. Unfortunately, there's, a lot of a limit for a lot of different things. And so how can you get creative and be strategic during this whole entire time? Very quickly, here is just some ways that you can get in contact with the Career Center and schedule an individual appointment with us. I highly recommend to schedule an individual appointment with a career counselor, especially if you have questions that are very particular to your situation or anything of that nature, because we'll be able to tailor it and help you specifically. We are still doing appointments. We are encouraging them to be virtual at this moment. So it would be either through Zoom or through phone, but we are open Monday through Friday. We do have some changes in our hours. We actually are open later than our normal office hours on Mondays and Thursdays. I work until 6 p.m. on those days, and we also have a grad assistant who works at that time too. So if you need to have a later appointment on either of those days, we can absolutely accommodate that. So very briefly, I am going to just kind of talk about the services that we do provide. We probably majority of our appointments are focused on career counseling, and that might seem a little, not necessarily for those who are either in grad school or upperclassmen and undergrad, but especially with the pandemic that has been happening and with COVID, a lot of students have been having a change in what they have for interests in their careers, and they really want to figure out how to navigate that. And so we have been seeing a lot of changes in terms of who is coming for career counseling appointments because of just the circumstances that we're in right now. We do a handful, actually a handful is probably not even the right term, for resume reviews and cover letters. I highly, highly, highly recommend coming to the Career Center and having us look over your resume, your cover letters, really any materials that you are going to be utilizing for applications. Because it's such a tailored and individualized thing, it makes more sense to do an individual appointment with us versus, you know, trying to do a presentation to the majority. And so we can help you through that process and making sure that you're selling yourself to the best of your ability, and also making sure that you are, you know, talking about certain components and certain things that employers are looking for on both documentations. We also will help you with the interview process. We will help you in terms of coaching you through what are some typical questions that you might get asked and what are some best practices in answering some of those common questions. We provide just appointments that are specifically just kind of going over those different types of questions, but then we also will do mock interviews where we really try to set the stage of what you're going to experience during that time, where we will ask you questions, you will answer those questions, and then we will kind of debrief and talk about what worked, what are some things that maybe you can tweak a little bit just to make sure that you're really just selling yourself to the best that you can. Job search strategies is another big one where we're not necessarily going to just provide you and show you all the different things that are out there, but more if you're stuck and are having some difficulty trying to figure out where to go from there and looking for different opportunities, or you find yourself, you keep applying, you're not getting to the interview, or you get to the interview, but then you're not getting the offer. What could be some of the roadblocks that you might be facing that you aren't really sure what's there? And it could be redoing your resume or, you know, how you are answering some of your questions. We have career fairs still. We're still doing our career fairs, both of our major ones, one that's in October actually on the 21st, and then which is our engineering job fair, and then our career fair, which is open for really all majors. Both of those are going to be virtual through CareerLink, and we have a lot of really great information about our career fairs on our UMaine website, so we definitely encourage you to check those out if you are planning on attending. And then lastly, we just try to organize different types of events and info sessions and workshops for our students to provide them with as much information as possible to help you on your next steps after undergrad. And all of these services are being offered virtually right now. Okay, so here's the big stuff. Here's the things that I think are the nitty gritty of what everyone is trying to figure out how to do during this time. And one thing is that it's always changing. And so right now it's the biggest thing, and it's not even listed on this slide, but it's being adaptable and being flexible right now in this situation that we're in. And when I say being flexible and adaptable, I mean in terms of what you're looking for or how you're looking for jobs or opportunities, it's important to be very open-minded. And you may not necessarily find your dream job on the first time you're looking for positions after you graduate. It might be that you're finding positions that have some transferable skills or have some components that you find really interesting, but you're not sure if it's necessarily going to be something you want to do for the rest of your career, but you don't know unless you really try to expand your skills and see what's out there. So we've been really trying to emphasize and provide advice and guidance to students that it's important to be adaptable and flexible with your job search and also with your networking. So one major thing is you want to make sure that you're being proactive with networking and when looking for jobs or just different opportunities. And part of that is focusing on what you can take advantage of. So instead of just, being in a place where they're, I can't do anything about this, so I'm just going to not do anything about it. That's not necessarily going to be the best strategy for you. And so you really want to make sure that you kind of have to put yourself out there right now, more so than in the past. And networking is going to be a huge component of that. And so ways for you to be networking and for you to get yourself out there is pretty similar to what you would be doing even without a pandemic or without, a lot of things being remote. It's just now things are being put more emphasis on utilizing different social channels, different online platforms. And so it could be, your form of networking could be joining different forums or different communities, or, attending symposiums like this, different types of webinars or different types of events that are being organized and by different associations that are within your field of work or within your field of interest, and putting yourself in those situations where you're learning. You want to be constantly learning, constantly interacting, or just like showing your face and to different professionals that are in the field. And so this is a great example of those who are attending the symposium. You are, you're networking and putting yourself out there without even realizing it. And so that's great. And so the more that you can do those types of things and joining different associations of the fields that you're interested in, you will always be in the know. You'll always know what trends are going on in your field, which is also just great information to have for interviews, because those are questions that you're going to get asked in interviews on how are you staying up to date with trends and what trends are you noticing in the field. But again, it's also helping you network. A popular social channel that a lot of students I know are taking advantage of, and also a lot of professionals and organizations take advantage of, is LinkedIn. So I'm sure you've heard it a lot that it's important to have a LinkedIn. You need to have a LinkedIn to connect with others, to look for jobs, all these different things. So LinkedIn can be a fantastic tool for networking and also for searching for jobs if you use it properly and to your advantage. So there's a lot of different resources that LinkedIn offers without purchasing the premium. I recommend to not purchase the premium one because it's money that you don't need to spend. And you can connect with professionals. You can follow different companies or organizations that are within your field or in your future field of work. There are different types of resources on LinkedIn to search for jobs. There are different like little videos and classes and tips to help you really utilize LinkedIn to the best of your ability. And it's important to use it. It's not just having a LinkedIn and just leaving it as is and you're like, yay, I'm networking, I'm doing the thing. You need to interact with your LinkedIn profile. And that is by making sure you have a professional photo for your LinkedIn. There's also components on LinkedIn that let you be able to tell employers on LinkedIn that you are looking for a job, so that when they do look at your profile, they are looking at it in a different light. And you want to make sure you are utilizing the different tools that are on there, like getting reviews or maybe getting letters of recommendation from professors or other professionals that you know that you're connected with on LinkedIn. One major thing that you want to make sure with LinkedIn, because I know this has happened to me quite a bit, and I'm sure a lot of the other professionals or the panelists that are on this particular symposium have probably experienced as well. A great way of staying connected and networking with professionals that you have either met at a webinar or a symposium or some sort of networking event within your field of work is business cards aren't necessarily as popular anymore, where a lot of people will say, oh, you should just connect with me on LinkedIn. And I think that's great. But when you are going to connect with somebody through LinkedIn, specifically an individual professional, when you are connecting, it's going to prompt you to write a note on connecting with that individual. It is extremely important, highly recommended, stars, asterisks all around that statement, to include how you know this individual. Remind the person that, oh, we met during this particular event. It was great talking with you about X, Y, and Z, before you hit, the the submit button or to send off your request to connect, because now you're more likely to connect with that professional. I've had a lot of people who have tried to connect with me and I have absolutely no idea who they are or what their reasoning of trying to connect with me with, and I honestly don't accept those connections. And it's just because I don't know what the goal is of us connecting, therefore I don't feel like it's appropriate to accept. So being able to really understand and make it obvious why you want to connect with me or how we know each other or just any professional is extremely important in networking, online, on social channels, on LinkedIn, in a variety of different ways. Other ways that you can network and also what's going to help you with your job search is joining, I kind of mentioned this already, joining a lot of different professional development opportunities. And so by expanding your skill set and expanding your network through these different professional development opportunities is not only going to connect you with other professionals in the field, but also other peers who might be in the same situation as you are, where they're trying to look for opportunities and they have similar interests to you. And they might have information about different things that you were not aware of. Also, you're gaining skills, you're building your resume, you are showing that you're not being complacent during this time. Again, going back to that whole idea of taking advantage of what you can control and being creative during this time. And how can you build your professional brand? How can you build your experiences and your resume for the times that we're in right now? Is it getting more up to date with how to utilize different programs and different tools that all of us are having to learn very quickly with being remote? And so there's a lot of different courses and different certificates and a lot of different things that you can take advantage of. A lot of companies are starting to offer these types of things like Google and LinkedIn. And so taking advantage of those can be extremely helpful for you during this time. Again, webinars, courses, presentations, any way where you can learn more and get yourself out there is just going to be extremely helpful for you for this next step. And then lastly is relationship building. Now, this can be done with a lot of the things that I was already talking about, but there's also ways that are even more of putting yourself out there, which are really called like cold reach outs, where you are reaching out to an individual or a professional at a company or organization that you really want to learn more about or really get connected to see if there are opportunities there. You can reach out to them through email. It's probably the most common and easiest way to do this. And reaching out to them to really introduce yourself and to start the conversation of potentially meeting with them or doing an informational interview through Zoom or doing a coffee chat, just to learn more about what they do, to learn more about their company, and essentially to learn more about opportunities that might be present there that might just not be on any of the job search websites yet. And even if there isn't necessarily anything that comes out of that particular conversation, you now have put your name in their network. And sometimes, students will include their resume, which again, I highly recommend you have the Career Center look at your resume before you submit anything like this, because you want to make sure it's up to date and it's selling your skills to the best of your ability. And just really saying that you want to make sure that they are aware that you exist and that you have an interest in what their company does and what their field does. This is a great way of networking and adding more to your network in a little bit more of a putting yourself forward type of way. Okay, so talked a lot about ways that you can really network and get yourself out there. And so you might be asking, okay, if I'm going to get myself out there and a lot of other people are doing the same thing, how do I make myself stand out from everyone else? And so I'm going to sound like a broken record on some of these things, but it's more of just to reiterate the importance of doing these different things. So one big thing is staying up to date with the trends that are going on in the field of work that you are interested in pursuing, and companies that you're interested in. And this can be done by researching on their website following their platform. So, following them on Facebook. If they have an Instagram, follow them on Instagram, connect with them on LinkedIn, see what they're doing, see what's happening in their company and in their world so that you can be informed as to what's going on. And that's just going to be really helpful for you if you do want to try and connect with them to have a meeting to talk about potential opportunities there. And again, similar to doing the professional development opportunities, is you want to continue developing your skills that employers are looking for. This is going to be extremely helpful for you when it comes to actually applying to different positions. A lot of job opportunities now and job descriptions are starting to incorporate how can you engage your audience in a virtual sense? How can you, how are you in terms of working remotely? They're looking for more skills that are more digitally inclined. And so you want to make sure that not only one, you're staying up to date with those types of things and, understanding the different programs that can be utilized and, not just saying on your resume that you know how to use Microsoft Office. Well, how much do you know about Microsoft Office? Have you really been able to dive into that type of that platform and that program? And they want to see really the biggest things are how are your communication skills? Communication skills have changed quite a bit from being in person to now being remote. How have those skills changed? Have you developed them to still be able to present your information in a digital sense that still is reaching the audience and reaching those who are trying to get to? How are you with doing Zoom presentations? How are you with doing emails? And also along with that, with the remote work, it's a little bit harder to stay motivated and to take some initiative. So how can you demonstrate that you've done those things? Also, working in a team, working individually, having to be able to balance those two different opportunities is a little bit harder now with everything being remote. So how can you demonstrate that you have been able to transition from in-person to remote really well, but also how are you been able to maintain those skills remotely? And then same thing with leadership abilities. And a lot of the things that you have on your resume that you have done, when we were in person before, we've had to do a lot of things remote. Those are still valuable things to put on your resume and are very transferable. But you want to make sure that you're also incorporating how have you been continually learning and adapting to the environment that we're in right now. Also, when I was talking about relationship building and all of that, you really want to make sure that you understand what is your goal when it comes to networking. Do you want it to be more transaction based? Therefore, you are looking for something to come out of this conversation, whether it be you want to have a meeting come out of it, an interview come out of it, whatever it is. That's a very different approach to having a networking conversation with a professional versus, are you just trying to expand your network? Are you just trying to build relationships? That's a very different approach to that. So understanding what your goal is with networking is not only going to help you stand out because now you have a more targeted approach to your conversations, but it's just going to help you in your overall job search strategy. Again, keeping your information up to date on your LinkedIn, on all of your different platforms, because it's so much easier now for professionals to just find you remote, online and everything. So you want to make sure everything is up to date and consistent. And then lastly, you want to be patient. Things are definitely a little bit slower in terms of timelines, people getting back to you. It's very overwhelming right now, but be patient. It will all come out, it will all work out in the end, but by being proactive and taking advantage of what you can is going to help you be patient. Okay. This is my last slide, and then I'll be done. So the very last thing is, and this again is going to help you with your job search and help you with networking in this current time that we're in, is always doing follow-up notes, thank you notes. Those really kind of go in hand. Whenever you have a conversation with someone, shooting them an email just saying, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it and would love to talk, with you further. But taking that little extra extra initiative and a little extra effort to send a thank you or follow-up note to anybody you have a conversation with or who has ever helped you in this entire process really does go a long way and can be extremely helpful for you down the road in terms of networking and looking for jobs. Okay. If there are questions, obviously I am happy to answer any questions that any of you may have. But of course, if you do not have any questions, because I do know we're short on time for the next panelist, if you do have any questions or want to schedule an appointment with the Career Center, you can either, I think I had on our first slide, I'll bring it to the back there, is you can either call our front desk at 581-1359, or you can always email us at UMaineCareerCenter@maine.edu, and we are happy to help you with any questions or concerns that you have when it comes to networking or job search strategies.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Samantha, for such a wonderful presentation. I always tell the students you need to go and talk with Samantha Wheeler, so you can see she's very nice, she's very engaging. Don't be intimidated, go to the Career Center.
I'm like the least intimidating person, I think, in our office. So yes, please come and see me.
There is a question, people are asking if they can get a copy of the slides that you've presented.
I can certainly share that with Mindy or whoever I need to share. I think they actually already has my slides, so I can, however that needs to happen, yes, is the answer to that.
Wonderful, thank you. Are there any other final questions? I liked so many of the things you said, and one of them that I think is so important is that we have to have an online presence these days, and it has to be a very positive online presence, and we have to continue to update it. So we can't just put out a website or put out our LinkedIn and then let it sit there. And I totally am guilty of doing this.
I am too.
We forget about doing it.
Yes. Do what I say and not what I do is really the big takeaway from that, because I don't do a good job of that, but y'all need to do it.
Yes. Do as we say, not as we do.
Exactly. 100%.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So now we just have a few minutes before we get started with our next presentation from Dan Dixon, the Director of Sustainability. So we'll just take a few minutes break and we'll start right around 11:30. Welcome everyone to our final workshop in our special sessions for this morning. And our next session will be led by Dan Dixon, who's the Director of Sustainability. He's going to talk about UMaine sustainability. I'm really excited to learn more about this. I would love to hear about our campus sustainability initiatives. So Dan, you can take it away.
So good morning, everyone. My name's Dan Dixon. I'm a Research Assistant Professor in the UMaine Climate Change Institute. I'm also the Director of Sustainability for the UMaine campus. And today I'm going to give you an overview about campus sustainability initiatives. So climate change is shaping up to be the greatest challenge of our time. And as a society, we need to focus on mitigation, adaptation, and resilience. So all three of these are really desperately needed to kind of reach the types of goals that we're setting for ourselves. But we have to do all these three things with sustainability and systems thinking in mind. So the reason why we need systems thinking and sustainability is so that we don't create unintended consequences as we move forward with initiatives to reduce greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So what is sustainability and what does it mean for UMaine? So as you can see here, the Office of Sustainability mission is to reduce the environmental footprint of the campus, and through education and outreach efforts, produce an awareness and a genuine concern for the health of the environment in all UMaine constituents. So one of UMaine's leadership efforts is the Second Nature Carbon Commitment. This was formerly known as the American College and University President's Climate Commitment, and it changed its name a few years back. It was signed by University of Maine, then University of Maine President Robert Kennedy in 2007, and we were a charter signatory. And the primary purpose of the carbon commitment is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from institutions of higher education. And we, UMaine, that is, has committed to achieve carbon neutrality by 2040. So in addition to our carbon neutrality commitment, we have also committed to eliminate greenhouse gases, bit by bit over time, and complete an emissions inventory, a climate action plan, and take immediate steps to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We have interim reduction goals, and we also have committed to integrate sustainability into the curriculum and make all of our inventory and action plan and progress reports publicly available. And this is all through the Second Nature organization. So what you can see here is some historical campus energy use and emissions data. The plots show only scope 1 and 2 energy use and emissions. We have energy use on the left by source and emissions on the right, also by source. The gray section is number 6 oil, the purple section is natural gas, and the red section is electricity. And the scale goes from 1990 on the left to 2019 on the right. And what you can see is that back in the 90s, the campus was essentially using a ton of energy to heat itself, and it still does. And that energy was coming from number 6 oil, which is this big gray section here. Then in the early 2000s, we began a transition to natural gas as our primary fuel. And that's where you see this big purple section taking over and the number 6 oil in gray fading away. Our electric use has grown steadily over time, fairly slow growth, but again, just a steady increase. And then we had some other fuels like number 2 oil, propane, kerosene. We also have gasoline and diesel for our fleet. And these are down at the bottom. The largest of these was number 2 oil in the green, and you can see even since 2012, that's pretty much faded away to almost nothing. So that's our energy use. Then on the right, we've got the emissions from that energy and from those fuels. So you can see that the number 6 oil was producing a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. And as we transitioned into the natural gas in around 2004, 5, and 6, our emissions dropped significantly because natural gas produces about 25% less carbon emissions than number 6 oil. So our emissions dropped as we transitioned to natural gas as our primary heating fuel. And also the main electrical grid, and in fact, the New England electrical grid has been cleaning up over time, more and more renewables, less and less oil-fired generators, and more natural gas-fired stations. So you can see that the emissions from our electrical use have also dropped over time, despite our electrical use actually increasing. So 2005 was our peak emissions year, but for the purposes of the carbon commitment, we're currently using 2008 as our peak emissions year, as our baseline year. So what have we done at the steam plant? Since about 2/3 of our emissions come from thermal energy, which is used to heat the campus in the form of steam, small changes at the steam plant can result in a big change in emissions. So at the steam plant, they installed a 600 kilowatt back pressure turbine in 2009. And a back pressure turbine is an energy recovery project. So in the past, valves were used to regulate the steam pressure coming to campus. So instead of just using valves and wasting all that energy, the back pressure turbine was installed, and it actually spins blades and runs a generator and produces electricity. So that's a good energy saver right there. And the transition to natural gas in 2012 was accompanied by a brand new boiler, which was super efficient, boiler number 8. And that also helped us become more efficient and reduce our emissions. So ASHI STARS, the Sustainability Tracking Assessment and Rating System, which is STARS, is a program of ASHI, which is the Association for the Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Education. So STARS is essentially a comprehensive sustainability rating system for colleges and universities that addresses the environmental, social, and economic dimensions of sustainability. It's composed of about 72 individual credits, and the way we perform, how well we perform on each credit gives us a score, and then you add up the score at the end and you get a rating. So we ended up in 2019 getting a silver rating, which was pretty good for our first attempt. And here are some of the points of pride. We accomplished an 18% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions per weighted campus user from 2007 to 2017. We compost over 400,000 pounds of pre-consumer food waste every year, and we use it as a soil amendment all over campus. We have a 20% reduction in water use per campus user, again from 2007 to 2017. We divert 48% of our campus waste through recycling and composting programs, and over 60% of our cleaning and janitorial purchases are green certified, so we're not using terrible chemicals. And then all campus grounds are managed sustainably using the on-site generated compost and without the use of fertilizers, herbicides, pesticides, and fungicides. So that's just a few of our points of pride. Here are a few more. We're committed to teaching and researching sustainability topics, and the ASHI STARS data reveals that over 75% of departments support sustainability related research. Over 25% of UMaine researchers conduct sustainability related research, and over 65% of departments offer one or more courses that include sustainability. So we also on the campus have green funds. So these funds are designed to basically fund projects. They can be faculty, staff, or student-led projects, and they can be up to $500,000. And the projects must have a 5-year payback. So they must produce savings great enough to pay back the initial cost of the project in 5 years or less. In special cases, we will allow a 7-year payback, but we're really looking for projects at a 5-year payback or less. There are 2 funds, a green loan fund and a green revolving fund, both $500,000 each. The Green Loan Fund is a financial partnership between the University of Maine Foundation and the University of Maine system on behalf of the University of Maine. And we have 5 Green Fund projects completed to date, all of them LED lighting conversion projects. And together they're saving UMaine more than $55,000 a year. The projects so far have been the Mahaney Dome lights, the AMC and ASCC lights, so that's the Advanced Manufacturing Center and the Advanced Structures and Composite Center lights. They were replaced with LEDs. The Wallace Pool lights and the New Balance Student Recreation Center basketball court lights. So both of these funds are really rooted in the belief that lasting solutions to environmental problems can create environmental and economic benefits, which they do. They save us money, they help us use less energy, and therefore help us to release less carbon emissions into the atmosphere. So they're very successful. So dining and residence halls, these are both run by Auxiliary Services, and Auxiliary Services has been focused on saving energy and resources for many, many years. And all in all, they're really one of UMaine's top sustainability champions. And just a few highlights. So in the dining services, they have committed to 25% local food by 2025. Prior to that, the commitment was 20% local food by 2020, and they achieved that 3 years early. So they achieved 20% local food by November 2017. There's trayless dining and unlimited access to food in the dining commons. This reduces food waste. It may be counterintuitive that if you give someone unlimited access to food, you might think they would eat more, but actually they eat less. There's a Hilltop dishroom pulper that saves 400 gallons of water a day. There's a Wells dishroom food digester, which turns solid food waste into liquid. There's an advanced composting facility that was mentioned previously. It composts over 400,000 pounds of food waste a year. We have hoop house greens, which are grown by students and are then served in the UMaine dining commons. These are also grown with the UMaine compost. We're a member of the EPA Food Recovery Challenge, which diverts food waste from landfills. We have green to go reusable food containers and compostable plant-based food service containers, both of which minimize environmental impact. On the housing side of things, we have low flow shower heads in all the dorms. We have occupancy sensors in almost all the dorm rooms and hallways. High efficiency lights, so we have LEDs that use less energy. Heating controls in most of the residence rooms so that students can control, to a large extent, control the heat in their rooms. And we have lots of outreach and education to encourage residents to keep temperatures at 65 degrees or less. We also have printing services and Black Bear Exchange. So printing services is a department of auxiliary services, and then Black Bear Exchange is a department of student life. Printing services have done very well in recent years. They're one of the first printers in Maine to adopt a chemical-free plate making process. They have the choice of acid-free, chlorine-free, and all different grades of recycled paper. They use material from the Sustainable Forestry Initiative, SFI, and the Forest Stewardship Council, which is FSC. And a lot of their products are certified by either one or both of these two initiatives. They use soy-based inks, and they recycle all their toner. So pretty sustainable printing on campus, and they offer good prices too, and they deliver, so that's great. The Black Bear Exchange, again, it's a department of student life. It ensures that all UMaine constituents have equal access to essential resources such as food and clothing. The food pantry is open to students and their families, their immediate families, also staff and faculty. They get a lot of their food from UMaine dining services, so if there's any leftover food from the dining commons, it goes straight over to the Black Bear Exchange where it's frozen and given out to hungry folks. There's a clothing swap that's open to anyone and everyone, and they also do regular food drives and fundraisers. So lots of good stuff going on there. Tons of UMaine community outreach efforts going on related to sustainability. Here are just 3 examples. We have the Maine Harvest for Hunger. Since 2000, they have raised, gathered, and donated more than 1,300 metric tons of fresh produce and delivered it in the local area. There's the Black Bear Food Guild, which is essentially a CSA program. It's run by students on a 3-acre organic farm. They sell about 60 shares a year, and 1 share feeds 4. And it's a great program on a local UMaine-owned farm. Then we have the Cooperative Extension Program. This is really more of a system-wide effort. There's 16 county offices located throughout the state, and it's part of a nationwide cooperative extension system, which works through the land-grant universities in each state. They are really the doorway to the expertise it's the public doorway to the expertise on the UMaine campus. So we have sustainable transportation. We have the Black Bear Orono Express. It's a free shuttle service that helps the university and the town of Orono create a healthier climate and environment by reducing carbon emissions, congested traffic, and crowded parking lots. And it's free to everyone. Then we have the Community Connector, which is a Bangor-based bus service. It's a fixed route public transit system operated by City of Bangor for the communities of the greater Bangor area. And then if you have a Maine card, you can ride any of those buses, for any of the Community Connector buses, for free. And their network is fairly extensive, so you can actually cover a lot of area just by having a Maine card. We have LEED certified buildings on campus. LEED is an internationally recognized whole building approach to sustainability. UMaine has 5 LEED certified buildings, and 2 recent buildings that have been built to LEED certified standards. One of those is the Maynard F. Jordan Observatory in the Amera Astronomy Center. It's built to LEED Silver certification, but it hasn't yet been certified. And then what you also may have noticed is the big construction site opposite the gym, or near the gym. And that's the Furland Engineering Education Design Center being built. And that should be built to LEED standards as well. UMaine currently partners with Casella Waste Systems and offers a zero-sort single-stream recycling service. We produce about 300 metric tons of recycling each year, and we have to pay to get rid of that, pay per ton to get rid of it. So, but it costs less to get rid of our recycling than it does to get rid of our waste. So the more that we recycle, the more money we save, and the less emissions we produce. Lots of campus education and outreach going on for sustainability. On the left, you'll see a student, it was a poster produced for student dorm corkboards. And one year we went around and posted one of these in every single dorm room. It's probably about time to do that again, I would think. And then we also produced door hangers for E&G and office buildings over the campus. And on one side, we have zero-sort recycling information, and on the other side, energy-saving tips. Since the Office of Sustainability was formed back in the mid-2000s, we've won tons and tons of awards and recognition for the campus. Two very notable awards was a Green Honor Roll from the Princeton Review in 2011 and 2012. And we have consistently been included in the Princeton Review Green Colleges Guide ever since 2010. This is one of my favorite initiatives going on at the moment. It's SPIRE, the Maine Journal of Conservation and Sustainability. It's an interdisciplinary journal housed at the University of Maine, and it's primarily run by graduate and undergraduate students. At its heart, it's an interdisciplinary and community engaged resource. So we encourage submissions from any field or background. The more diversity, the better. Submitted works can take a number of different forms, including, but not limited to, essays, research articles, collections of data, journalism pieces, narratives, poems, artwork, photography, or other digital media. And the submissions should advance dialogue around conservation and sustainability and be relevant to Maine readers. Because this journal is run by graduate and undergraduate students, you can join the SPIRE student group and become an editor and get some really valuable experience editing submitted articles. If you don't fancy being an editor, you could just consider submitting an article yourself, and you will get a proper reference. We have 4 issues out at the moment, and we're currently working on the 5th. Here you can see the cover of the 4th issue. Every year we have a cover art competition, and the winner receives $100. Tons and tons of additional sustainability initiatives taking place all across campus. Too many to list, too many to talk about, but if you want to know more, feel free to email me, sustainability@maine.edu, and I can answer any questions you might have related to campus sustainability. Thanks.
Dan, thank you so much. I learned so much in that presentation. I have tons of questions, but we actually have a few in the Q&A box. So if you don't mind, I'm going to go through and ask the questions. So the first question was, why was the 2008 the baseline for emissions? You said 2005 was the peak. I'm sorry if I missed that.
No, that's absolutely right. I think it's probably because the climate commitment was originally signed in 2007. And during that, after it was signed, that was when the efforts to measure our emissions really began in earnest. So 2008 was probably the first full year where we measured our emissions accurately and set up a system for doing it every single year. I would like to go back and relook at that though, because 2005 really was a much higher peak than 2008, and I'm considering making 05 our baseline year instead, and then we can achieve greater reductions.
as a follow-up, there is a question about the goals. And do you think UMaine is on track to achieve the goal of carbon neutrality by 2040? Is that being tracked, and if so, how?
Yes, I report UMaine's emissions every year to Second Nature. We also report to EPA. So our emissions are being tracked very closely. We are slightly below the goal we would like for 2020, but there are lots of projects ongoing, including a complete revamp of the University of Maine Central Steam Plant. And it's expected that once these projects are finished, we will be well on our way to achieving carbon neutrality by 2040.
Awesome. A couple of other questions. How can someone join SPIRE?
There's a SPIRE student group, so you can search that out and join, or you can just email the SPIRE chief editor at, I think it's spire@maine.edu.
Then there was a question of clarification for what you meant by the unlimited access to dining. Is that a certain meal plan that students can purchase?
I believe that in the past, the way the dining system worked was that you would have a certain number of swipes on your card. So you could, if you wanted breakfast, lunch, and dinner, that would be 3 swipes. You'd go in 3 times a day. And what they found was what people were doing was going in there, piling their tray really high because they'd used a swipe. So they'd pile their tray high, eat as much as they could, couldn't finish it, and then would throw the rest away. So instead, what is happening now is there's a trailer system, so you can't pile up a tray anymore, but you also have unlimited swipes. So you don't go in there and try and pile your plate up anymore, because if you're hungry, you can just go back in again. See what I mean? And it actually ends up reducing waste, which is counterintuitive, but it works.
No, it makes sense. Yeah, people are like planning for later, but
Yeah.
they can't handle it. Totally. Well, I have a question about recycling of electronics and things like that on campus, and batteries and those kinds of things that it's not quite clear how to recycle those kinds of things. Do you have any advice about that?
Yeah, if you have waste electronics, you need to call Resource Recovery, which is 581-3076, and you can arrange for a pickup. And our electronics goes to a recycler where it's recycled safely. And unfortunately, the state doesn't have a mandate for recycling single-use alkaline batteries currently, so we don't do it. However, we do recycle rechargeables. And a lot of the main offices in our buildings have a battery recycling bucket for these rechargeable batteries. And again, you can email me, sustainability@maine.edu, and I will provide the information about this stuff. Also, you can go to the website, maine.edu/sustainability, and there is a page there with tons of recycling information.
Great. Well, Dan, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for a wonderful presentation and for all of your efforts on campus. Really appreciate it. Okay, so now we just have a few minutes where we can take about a 5-minute break or so before we have our very special keynote speaker, Travis Mills, who will be introduced by President Freeney Mundy.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the symposium so far. It is my great pleasure to welcome Dr. John Freeney Mundy, President of University of Maine and University of Maine at Machias, to join us on the podium and introduce our featured speaker for today.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abedi. On April 10th, 2012, United States Army Staff Sergeant Travis Mills of the 82nd Airborne was critically injured in his 3rd tour of duty in Afghanistan by an improvised explosive device, losing portions of both legs and both arms. He is one of only 5 quadruple amputees from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan to survive such extensive industries. Travis now lives an inspiring life as a quadruple amputee. He has written a New York Times best-selling memoir titled Tough as They Come. He speaks across the country, motivating others to live by his motto, never give up, never quit. And his foundation's state-of-the-art facility in the Belgrade Lakes region of Maine hosts combat injured veterans and their families for all expense-paid, barrier-free vacations. In October 2018, Travis was given the New Englander of the Year Award by the New England Council. In March of 2019, he was awarded the Citizens Award from the Congressional Medal of Honor Society in Washington, D.C. He also holds honorary doctorates from Unity College and Bates College. Travis, it is a pleasure and an honor to welcome you to the University of Maine's Symposium. For joining us. Thank you for your service and your message of hope, your great humor, and the inspiration for this. We're delighted that you're in Maine, and thank you for being with us here today. Ali, I turn it back to you now for the awards ceremony.
Thank you very much, President Fernie-Mondy. I would also like to thank our featured speaker today for the energizing speech. We are now ready to start the final session of the day, the much anticipated award ceremony. It is my great pleasure to introduce the President of Student Government, Harrison Ransley, to start the award ceremony. Harrison?
All right. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Student government is excited to be a major part of this event. Also, I would like to just personally thank everyone for being here today. These sorts of events are really important, and I personally think especially nowadays, because it really brings out a lot of teamwork and team effort that everyone does here. And it's not just for themselves, but it's for their community and the people around them. Each presentation was reviewed and scored by 3 independent judges, including members of the UMaine community, faculty, staff, graduate students, as well as judges external to campus from local industries, including our sponsors. Although all presentations were extremely well done and the competition was very close, the following student groups rise to the top and are recognized next. I would like to invite the Vice President and Chief of Staff, Dr. Kimberly Whitehead, and Associate Vice President for Graduate Studies, Scott Delcourt, to join me to announce the student awardees.
Thank you, Harrison. I'm pleased to join Vice President Kimberly Whitehead in honoring the graduate students who have received awards today at the symposium. First up in the category of Allied Health, the Graduate Student Award winner is Rachel Coleman, advised by Jennifer Crittenden.
The Undergraduate Student Award winner is Sophia Pelagas, advised by Christopher Grinrod.
In the category of Arts, the Graduate Student Award winner is Rachel Church, advised by Susan Smith.
The Undergraduate Student winner is Olivia Bradstreet, advised by Ronald Netto.
In the category of Biomedical Sciences, there were co-winners at the graduate level. The first co-winner is Ashley Susi, advised by Lucy Liao, and she shares the award with Avery Bond, advised by Melissa McGinnis.
The Undergraduate Student winner in the category of Biomedical Sciences is Remy Gagan, advised by Melissa McGinnis. In the category of Business, the Undergraduate Student Award winner is Samuel Varga, advised by Grant Miles. In the category of Education, the Undergraduate Award winner is Emmeline Richardson, advised by Daniel Coleman.
In the category of Engineering and Information Sciences, the Graduate Student Award winner is Daniel Reagan, advised by Caitlin Howell.
The Undergraduate Student Award winner is Basil White, advised by Andre Khalil.
In the Interdisciplinary Research category, the Graduate Student Award winner is Meredith Lewis, advised by Cynthia Lofton.
The Undergraduate Student Award winner is David Plouffe, advised by Robert Ladd.
In the category of Natural Sciences, the Graduate Student Award winner is Nicole Ramberg Pyle, advised, or co-advised rather, by Hamish Gregg and Steve Coughlin.
The undergraduate student award winner is Claudia Desjardins, advised by Pauline Kamath.
In the category of physical and mathematical sciences, the graduate student award winner is Elnaz Jamalzad, advised by Thomas J. Schwartz.
The undergraduate student award winner is Abram Karam, advised by Peter Steklinski.
In the category of social science and humanities, the graduate student award winner is Angelica Bove, advised by Rebecca McCauley.
The undergraduate student award winner is Tegan LaPierre, advised by Molly Rubin.
And the Susan J. Hunter Presidential Research Impact Award, graduate student award winner goes to Daniel P. Reagan, advised by Caitlin Howell.
The undergraduate student award winner for the Susan J. Hunter Presidential Research Impact Award is Tegan LaPierre, advised by Molly Rubin.
Congratulations to all student award winners. I'm pleased to turn over the mic to Saman Zari, President of the Graduate Student Government, who will introduce the Faculty Mentor Awards.
Thank you, Scott. So, the Faculty Mentor Award for the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences goes to Molly Rubin, Carl Tripp, and Francis Vogt. For the College of Education and Human Development, the Faculty Mentor Award goes to William D. Nichols. Faculty Mentor Award for the College of Engineering goes to Sheila Adalatpour. And for the Maine Business School, the Faculty Mentor Award goes to Stefano Tiarina. And finally, for the College of Natural Sciences, Forestry, and Agriculture, the Faculty Mentor Award goes to Ben King, Dorothy Clemens-Zakis, and Julia McGuire. Congratulations to all these awardees. And with that, I would like to turn the mic to Harrison for the closing remarks.
All right. Congratulations, everyone. I would like to thank all of the student presenters and awardees just one more time. You all did an amazing job, and I was blown away by a lot of the work that you all are doing. I would also like to thank the faculty advisors who have provided these students with the opportunity to conduct research. I know that as students, we greatly appreciate these research opportunities, and we really appreciate you continuing to provide us with them. I would also like to thank the judges and the 40+ Planning and Operations Committee volunteers who have helped make today possible. This event continues to grow each year, and it would not be possible to put on such an event without you all. And I'd like to give a huge round of applause for our sponsors. You provide us students with this presentation platform. For many of us, this is the first time we get to showcase our hard work. Our 2020 sponsors were once again, the hosts were Student Government, the Graduate Student Government, the Center for Undergraduate Research, the Office of the Vice President for Research, and the Dean of the Graduate School. Our platinum sponsors, Texas Instruments and the Maine Technology Institute, Alton 38 and Adelaide Ham Campus Activity Fund. Our silver sponsors were IEEE Maine Section and Activas Diagnostics. And our bronze sponsors were University Credit Union, Upstart Center for Entrepreneurship, Jackson Lab, SMRT Architects and Engineers, TRC Companies, Inc., Power Engineers, and ND Paper. This concludes our 2020 UMaine Student Symposium. Please fill out our online survey to help us improve this event, and please plan to join us again on April 16th, 2021 for our next event. Thank you all.